Hello there, and welcome to Just About Earth, where curiosity gets cozy and science takes the scenic route to wonder. Tonight, we're not looking at the ticking of clocks or the movement of stars, but at something much older, much quieter, and somehow still speaking across millennia. The pyramids, those silent giants of stone, resting beneath the sun and stars as if waiting for a message to arrive. You've seen them in pictures, maybe even walked among them, their sharp edges against the endless sky, their shadows stretching like sundials over the desert floor. And yet, no matter how familiar they seem, there's always that feeling that they're holding something back, something deliberate, as if they weren't built simply to stand, but to say something. Maybe not to us, at least not originally, maybe to someone or something else. Before we wander into their secrets, where are you listening from tonight? Maybe you're somewhere far from sand and heat, wrapped in blankets, or lying still in the quiet of your own room. Wherever you are, take a moment to imagine the air of the Egyptian desert, dry, soft, filled with the scent of dust and stone. Imagine standing there at twilight, when the heat fades and the sky cools to deep indigo. The pyramids rise out of the horizon like thought made solid. They don't ask to be understood. They just are. And that, perhaps, is part of their message. If this kind of slow exploration feels like a small refuge from the rush of your day, I'd be grateful if you gave the video a like or maybe subscribed. It helps this quiet little corner of calm reach more wanderers who enjoy falling asleep with the sound of questions. Now settle in, breathe easy, and let's begin. Because for all their silence, the pyramids have never really stopped speaking. Out there in the desert, the night moves differently. The air carries no moisture, no rustling trees, no hum of cities. It's a soundscape made of absence. When you stand among those stones, you can almost hear your heartbeat echoing off them. The Great Pyramid at Giza, nearly 5,000 years old, doesn't crumble under the weight of time. It hums. Not audibly, perhaps, but in the way presence hums. You can feel it through your bones, that subtle vibration of something both enduring and intentional. When people first stood before these massive structures, long before tourists and tour guides, long before the world even had the word ancient, they must have wondered what we still wonder now. Who are these for, and why this shape? To call them tombs feels like calling the ocean a puddle. It explains something, but not enough. The precision, the placement, the patience it took, none of it matches the idea of a mere burial monument. You can't spend decades shaping millions of stones, aligning them to the stars, calculating angles so exact that even modern engineers study them, just to hide a body. It's too grand, too careful, too mathematical. It feels like a conversation written in a language we haven't quite remembered how to read. The more we learn about them, the stranger they become. The Great Pyramid of Khufu, for instance, once gleamed white under the sun, its limestone casing smooth and brilliant like a beacon. From miles away it would have looked like a ray of light solidified, a geometry of sunlight rising from the desert. If you were a traveller coming from the Nile, that shining shape would greet you like a signal. Some say it was a symbol of resurrection, a stairway to the heavens. Others whisper that it might have been something far more literal, a transmitter of sorts, built to send a message not through words or sounds, but through alignment, proportion, and resonance. Imagine that idea for a moment without rushing to decide if it's true or false. Suppose the pyramid was meant to communicate with its builders' gods, their ancestors, or even their creators. Suppose each block of stone, each angle, each corridor was not random or merely decorative, but functional, like parts of a machine made not of metal, but of meaning. What would that mean for us now, thousands of years later, still receiving a signal we don't yet know how to decode? When you stand at the base of the Great Pyramid, your sense of scale collapses. The blocks are taller than you, each weighs tons, some as much as an elephant, and there are more than 2 million of them. And yet the joints between them are so tight you can barely slip a sheet of paper through. It's as if the builders understood stone the way we understand code, as something that could carry information, store precision, preserve intent. Under the stars, the alignment becomes clearer. The sides of the Great Pyramid are oriented almost perfectly to the cardinal directions, north, south, east and west, with an accuracy within a fraction of a degree. This isn't coincidence. To achieve that, the builders would have needed not just labour, but astronomical knowledge, an understanding of Earth's rotation and the movement of the stars. This means they weren't building blindly. They were synchronizing with something. The question is, with what? There's an ancient line of thought that says architecture is frozen music, that proportions can sing, that mathematics itself hums when arranged correctly. The pyramids seem to echo this. Their measurements contain ratios found in natural systems, the circumference of Earth, the orbit of Mercury, even the constant pi long before anyone officially defined it. Whether coincidence or design, the patterns repeat too cleanly to ignore. You start to wonder if the builders were encoding not just art or religion, but information about the universe itself, a message, not for their time, but for anyone, anywhere, who could someday understand. If you imagine the world as it was then, with no engines, no cranes, no electricity, you start to see how extraordinary it was to attempt something of this magnitude. But perhaps the goal wasn't purely physical. Maybe the pyramid wasn't built to reach the gods, but to reach through them. A bridge between the material and the immaterial, between creation and the creators. When you think of it that way, the effort begins to make more sense. You don't build forever monuments just to last. You build them to be heard. Night settles over Giza like velvet. The stars sharpen above the horizon, and the temperature drops so quickly, you can feel the desert breathe. In that stillness, the pyramids almost seem alive, like they're waiting for someone to speak first. Archaeologists and historians study their chambers, their passages, the patterns carved into their walls, searching for practical explanations, burial rituals, astronomical markers, mathematical exercises. But there's another possibility, one that science and myth both hesitate to claim. What if these structures weren't messages to gods but to makers, a way for the created to speak back to the source? Civilizations all over the world share this impulse, to build, to reach upward, to align with the sky. It's as if humanity, in every era, has felt an invisible thread tugging at them, urging them to send something back along it. From the ziggurats of Mesopotamia to the step pyramids of Mesoamerica, that shape, wide at the base, tapering to a point, keeps returning. It's not just practical engineering, it's symbolic geometry. It's how we draw the act of connection itself. The pyramid shape is stability reaching for transcendence, Earth's heavy hand stretching toward the infinite. There's something deeply human about that. Even without alien theories or lost technologies, the act itself carries a kind of communication. The message might be as simple as, "We are here," or maybe "We understand." It's the same sentiment we send into space today, with golden records and radio waves, hoping someone might hear. The pyramids might have been the first version of that impulse, a planetary broadcast written in stone. Inside, the air changes. The corridors are narrow, the light dim, and every sound feels amplified. Some researchers have noted how the chambers resonate at specific frequencies, especially the king's chamber. A low hum, an almost musical vibration, emerges when sound bounces between the granite walls. It's subtle, but measurable. Could it be coincidence? Maybe. But sound has always been sacred in ancient cultures. Words created worlds in their myths. Vibrations held power. And here, deep within tons of stone, a human voice could merge with the structure itself, becoming part of something vast. Perhaps the builders knew that, and designed the pyramid not just as a resting place, but as a resonator, a kind of instrument meant to carry intention beyond ordinary reach. You can picture the ritual, torches flickering, air thick with dust, voices chanting deep in the chamber. the sound growing fuller, merging with the stone until the whole structure seems to breathe. To those who built it, that vibration might have been the message, the moment when human sound met divine architecture. It didn't need words. It was communion through frequency, meaning through resonance, and above it all, the stars. Ancient Egyptians didn't just see stars as lights. They saw them as living entities, places of the afterlife, homes of gods and ancestors. Their entire burial and temple system was aligned with the heavens because to them, the sky wasn't far away. It was the continuation of Earth. The pyramids point upward not only physically but conceptually directing the soul's journey. If they believed their kings became stars after death, then perhaps these monumental forms were the launch pads, the transmitters sending the spirit and the message it carried into the cosmic beyond. When you look at it through that lens, the phrase, built to communicate with their creators, starts to sound less like science fiction and more like ancient psychology. These were people asking the same questions we still ask. Who made us? Why are we here? Are we alone? They didn't have telescopes or satellites, so they used what they had: stone, sweat, and geometry to reach for answers. In doing so, they left behind monuments that still whisper those same questions back to us. The air in the desert grows cold as night deepens, and you can almost imagine that the stars themselves are answering. Their light, after all, is ancient. When you see Orion's belt hanging above the horizon, the same 3 stars the pyramids were aligned to, you're seeing light that left its source thousands of years ago. It's entirely possible that the builders of Giza looked up at that same glow and wondered if they were being watched in return. The symmetry is haunting. The pyramids mirror the stars mirror the pyramids, and between them lies humanity, listening. For generations, people have searched for meaning in that mirroring. Maybe it's symbolic, maybe intentional. But it feels like something more than coincidence when the layout of Earth's greatest monuments matches the shape of the heavens above. To some, that's evidence of divine design. To others, it's proof of human genius, the ability to replicate the universe in miniature. Either way, the result is the same: a bridge between the mortal and the cosmic, a structure that doesn't just point upward but participates in the sky's geometry. That's what makes the pyramids so endlessly fascinating. They exist at the border of myth and mathematics, spirituality and engineering. You can study them scientifically and still feel their mystery pressing quietly at the edge of comprehension. You can calculate their proportions and still find yourself asking why they feel alive. Every measurement leads to another question. Every explanation opens a deeper one. Some nights, when wind moves through the desert, people say it carries a low hum, a sound that seems to come from the stones themselves. It's probably just the way air moves between their gaps, but if you let yourself listen differently, it's easy to imagine it as something else. A faint ongoing signal. The pyramid still speaking patiently to whomever was meant to listen. Maybe that's us. Maybe we were always meant to decode their silence. Or maybe we already are, just slowly as science and imagination catch up to what they left behind. And so, the story unfolds, stone by stone, theory by theory, beneath a sky that has never stopped listening. The sand shifts, the stars burn on, and those great pyramids continue to hold their quiet vigil, waiting, as if for a response that might yet arrive. Long before the first pyramid rose from the desert, long before anyone thought to carve stone into the shape of a mountain, humans were already looking up. It seems to be one of the oldest instincts we have. To lift our gaze toward the sky, to watch clouds drift, to trace the path of the sun as it climbs and falls. Somewhere in the act of looking, wonder began. And with wonder came a question that never quite left us. If we are down here, who or what might be up there? The ancient Egyptians weren't the first to build toward that question, but they might have done it most beautifully. Yet their impulse didn't appear from nowhere. It was part of a long lineage of reaching. Every early culture that settled long enough to build anything began stacking, piling, shaping matter upward. Mud bricks, stones, wood, whatever they had. the result was always the same, a rising form that seemed to point towards something unseen. It's tempting to think they were just being practical, building high to see further or to honour their rulers. But when you study how these structures line up with the sky, the pattern becomes harder to ignore. These weren't just fortresses or tombs. They were extensions of thought itself. Humans have always been fascinated by height. From cliffs and volcanoes to mountain peaks and clouds, vertical space seems to carry a kind of authority. It represents the unknown, the unreachable, the divine. The higher something is, the closer it feels to mystery. When people first started building permanent structures, it wasn't enough to just live inside them. They wanted those structures to gesture upward, to echo that instinct. You can see it in ziggurats, in temple towers, in the stepped platforms that dotted Mesopotamia long before the pyramids appeared. Each one a physical prayer, rising layer by layer, as if human effort could shorten the distance between the ground and the gods. But the Egyptians took that impulse and refined it into something timeless. Their early versions, the mastabas, were simple rectangular tombs. Then came the step pyramid of Djoser, a stack of those rectangles built one atop another. The design feels experimental, like someone testing how far upward the earth itself could stretch. Over generations, the shape evolved. Smooth sides replacing steps, precision replacing roughness, until the Great Pyramid emerged. A geometry so balanced that it feels less like construction and more like discovery, as if the shape was waiting there all along and humanity finally remembered how to uncover it. Some anthropologists argue that this drive to build upward isn't about religion at all, but about survival and perception. From a high point you can see danger approaching. You can watch the river, the herds, the horizon. But that explanation feels incomplete. There's a difference between climbing a hill for safety and hauling millions of limestone blocks into perfect alignment with the stars. One is instinct, the other is intention, and intention suggests communication. In every era, reaching up has been a kind of signal. Fire towers, smoke columns, church spires, rocket launches, they all share the same basic grammar. Something rises, something is sent, something is received. When ancient Egyptians built their pyramids, perhaps they were participating in that same eternal syntax, using stone instead of smoke, geometry instead of flame. The pyramid was their broadcast, sent not in light or sound but in form. Its message was endurance, its language proportion, its audience unknown. When you think about the sheer persistence of these monuments, the metaphor becomes literal. They have outlasted empires, floods, invasions, and even the memory of their own makers. They've continued standing while languages vanished and continents reshaped. If that's not communication, what is? Maybe endurance itself was the message. To say, we were here, and we could shape the world. To prove, perhaps to whatever powers they believe created them, that they too could create. There's a quiet irony in that idea. The pyramids might have been built as messages to gods or creators, but they've ended up speaking most clearly to us. They're reminders that humanity's first and strongest language isn't words, it's pattern, structure, the urge to make meaning visible. Every culture builds something that points toward the sky, but not every culture does it with such deliberate mathematics. The Egyptians measured and measured again, aligning their work to the cardinal direction so precisely that even today satellites marvel at it. It's almost as if they weren't building for the gods, but with them, as if they saw themselves as participants in creation rather than its spectators. To understand why, you have to imagine their worldview. To the ancient Egyptians, the gods weren't distant deities floating somewhere above the clouds. They were woven into everything. The river, the stars, the cycles of day and night. Their myth of creation began not with light, but with balance. Out of chaos emerged order, and that order was maintained through harmony. Every action, every ritual, every structure had to reflect that cosmic symmetry. building upward wasn't about defiance, it was about alignment. The pyramid, in its perfection, wasn't a challenge to the divine, it was a collaboration. When you walk around the base of the Great Pyramid, you can feel that order in your body. Every side faces almost exactly true north, south, east, and west. The corners are so square that you'd think they were drawn by machines, yet they were shaped by hand. The slope of the sides, about 51 degrees, forms a ratio that corresponds beautifully with certain mathematical constants, as though the builders knew that nature itself prefers simplicity expressed through precision. Whether or not they understood it in modern terms, they must have felt it intuitively. Geometry, after all, isn't just math. It's the logic of nature made visible. There's something profoundly human about this kind of creation. When we can't reach something, we build toward it. When we don't understand, we construct symbols of understanding. That's what art is, what architecture is. It's our way of talking to the universe, of saying we're listening, we're learning. The pyramids are that impulse in its purest form. Not decoration, not shelter, but dialogue. The shape itself seems designed for conversation. Its wide base anchors it to the earth, while its point stretches toward the infinite. The energy flows upward, naturally, visually and metaphorically. Even if you knew nothing about ancient Egypt, you'd understand what the pyramid was trying to do. It's the same feeling you get when looking at a mountain or a cathedral spire or even a tree. There's an upwardness to existence itself, a natural reaching that feels both physical and emotional. Perhaps that's what makes the pyramids universal. They express something that every human, in every era, can understand. The desire to connect the below with the above. And maybe that's why the idea of creators fits so naturally into this story. Not necessarily in the science fiction sense, but in the human sense. The people who built the pyramid saw themselves as part of a continuum of creation. They didn't separate divine power from human action. To build something perfect was to honour, and perhaps to participate in, the act of creation itself. When you think of it that way, the pyramids weren't messages sent to gods. They were echoes of the gods, reflections of the same creative spark. Across the world, similar shapes emerged independently. In Central America, the Maya built stepped pyramids aligned to celestial events. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats rose from the plains, serving as bridges between heaven and earth. In Cambodia, Angkor Wat was constructed as a symbolic model of the universe, with towers representing sacred mountains. None of these cultures had direct contact with each other, yet they all expressed the same idea in stone, that the sky and the earth were not separate realms but parts of one grand structure. It's as if humanity everywhere shared a memory of looking up and feeling that pull. That shared memory might have roots deeper than history. Some anthropologists suggest that our attraction to verticality, to building upward, is connected to our evolution. Early humans on the savannah had to scan the horizon constantly for survival. The higher the vantage point, the safer you were. Over time, looking up might have become a sign not just of awareness, but of aspiration. The sky became a symbol of safety and possibility, while the ground represented the known and the limited. Building upward, then, wasn't just practical, it was psychological. It was our way of manifesting the feeling that there's more above than below. And yet, there's something deeper still. When you think about how much effort goes into a structure like the Great Pyramid, decades of labour, thousands of workers, precise logistics, it's impossible to imagine it being driven only by utility. There had to be something spiritual sustaining it, a belief that this task mattered beyond their lifetimes. The workers might not have thought in terms of communicating with creators, but they would have felt that they were part of a larger purpose. To contribute to something that would outlive them was, in a sense, to touch eternity. The pyramid gave ordinary humans a role in a cosmic conversation. That conversation didn't need words. It was written in alignment, proportion, and endurance. The shape itself was the statement. Every angle, every stone said the same thing. balance, harmony, permanence. Those values mirrored their understanding of the cosmos. To them, creation wasn't random. It was measured, cyclical, ordered. By building something that reflected those patterns, they were aligning themselves with the divine architecture of existence. It wasn't communication through language, but through imitation. To build like the gods was to speak in their dialect. The deeper you look into the pyramid's design, the clearer that dialect becomes. The height of the Great Pyramid multiplied by a specific constant gives a near-perfect approximation of Earth's polar circumference. Its base perimeter relates to its height in the same ratio as the circle's circumference to its radius. These aren't coincidences easily brushed aside. Either the builders understood more about geometry and the planet than we thought possible, or their intuition about cosmic order was so strong that it naturally produced those relationships. In either case, the result is the same. The pyramid encodes something larger than itself. That encoding is what makes it feel alive. We may not know the full intention behind every measurement, but we recognize the intelligence behind it. It's like listening to a melody in a language you don't speak. You still sense meaning in its structure. The pyramids communicate not through symbols, but through symmetry. They don't need translation. They only need observation. When night falls on Giza, that communication feels most tangible. The air cools, the stars sharpen, and the pyramid's silhouette becomes a shadow against the sky. You can almost see it connecting. The base anchored in Earth's crust, the apex aligned with Orion, a literal line between planet and constellation. Its geometry as conversation, physics as faith. The builders might not have used our words for it, but they understood it intuitively. If creation speaks in mathematics, then to build in mathematics is to reply, we still do it, even if we don't realize it. Our skyscrapers, our satellites, our probes, all of them are continuations of that same reaching. When we send radio waves into space hoping for a reply, we're doing what the pyramid builders did with stone. We're broadcasting ourselves through the tools of our time. The difference is only in the medium. The message is the same. We exist. We're trying to understand you. And maybe, if those ancient builders could see us now, mapping the stars they once honoured, sending probes beyond the solar system, they'd recognise the gesture. They'd see that we never stopped reaching. The materials changed, the mathematics evolved, but the motive remained. To reach up is to remember that we are part of something larger. To build is to speak. To align is to listen. The desert winds continue their slow passage over the plateau, sweeping fine grains of sand across the stone faces of the pyramids. They've been doing that for thousands of years. The stones don't move, but the world around them does, just as the message remains while the language changes. The pyramids don't answer questions. They ask them quietly, endlessly, through the shape of their being. That is the ancient dream of reaching up, not to conquer the heavens, but to join them, to participate in the ongoing dialogue between what is made and what makes. Somewhere in that silence, in that perfect geometry, the dream still hums. The pyramids, in their stillness, continue to lift our eyes, reminding us that we were never meant to stay grounded in our curiosity. We were meant to rise with it. When you stand before the Great Pyramid, it doesn't speak in words, yet something about it feels unmistakably communicative. The precision of its lines, the symmetry of its form, the way it occupies space with such authority, it all feels like language, but one built out of proportions instead of sentences. There are no carvings on its outer walls, no declarations of purpose, no instructions etched in stone, and yet the entire structure seems to say something, just in a vocabulary we no longer fully remember. To look at it is to feel that message pressing against the edge of comprehension, as if meaning lies just beneath the visible surface, waiting for someone to listen with more than their eyes. Geometry has always been one of humanity's oldest languages. Long before we had alphabets, we had shapes, circles, triangles, and spirals carved into cave walls, drawn in sand, arranged in bones and shells. You can find those same patterns in the earliest art of almost every civilization, from the labyrinths of Crete to the carvings of the Indus Valley, from Neolithic Britain to the deserts of Africa. The shapes repeat not because people copied each other, but because they arise naturally from the way we see and measure the world. Geometry is the grammar of existence, the structure behind both art and physics. It is how nature organises itself, and how humans, perhaps unconsciously, imitate that order. The pyramid embodies that imitation perfectly. Its base, a square, represents stability, the grounded order of the material world. Its sides, 4 triangles converging to a single point, embody ascent, the movement from multiplicity to unity, from matter to meaning. In that simple form lies an entire philosophy of existence. The Egyptians may not have expressed it that way, but their builders understood it intuitively. They were mathematicians, astronomers, and engineers, but also philosophers in their own right, expressing in stone what they believed about the cosmos, that everything from the stars to the soul follows a pattern of balance and proportion. When archaeologists measure the Great Pyramid, they find that its dimensions are astonishingly consistent. Each side of the base measures roughly 230 metres, differing by only a few centimetres despite the immense scale. The slope of its sides corresponds almost exactly to a ratio that produces the constant pi when related to the pyramid's height, a mathematical relationship that wouldn't be formally defined for thousands of years. Whether intentional or not, that ratio connects the pyramid to the circle, the finite to the infinite. The circle has no beginning or end, while the pyramid ends in a single point. Together, they form a dialogue between eternity and moment, between boundlessness and precision. It's difficult to imagine that these relationships are mere accidents. The builders of Giza were not working from guesswork. They used chords, plumb lines, and sighting instruments to achieve alignments that rival modern surveying techniques. Their measurements reveal an understanding of geometry that feels almost instinctive, as though they were translating ideas rather than inventing them. Geometry, after all, doesn't belong to any one time or culture. It's not discovered so much as recognised. The same ratios that define a seashell spiral also define the pattern of galaxies. The same triangles that shape a roof beam appear in the paths of light through a lens. It's the same syntax everywhere, from the smallest atom to the largest star cluster. The Egyptians might not have used the word geometry as we do, but they spoke it fluently. To them, geometry wasn't abstract, it was sacred. Every measure, every line, every proportion carried meaning. When a temple or tomb was laid out, it wasn't just architecture, it was an act of alignment between human work and cosmic order. The ancient Egyptian word for this harmony was ma'at. It referred to truth, balance, and rightness, both moral and physical. To live in Ma'at was to exist in accordance with the natural flow of the universe. When they built, they weren't simply constructing spaces to occupy, they were recreating, on a smaller scale, the structure of creation itself. Geometry was how they expressed reverence. To measure was to honour, to align was to pray. The pyramid's geometry is subtle, but once you start to see it, it unfolds endlessly. Its 4 sides converge to form a point that, if extended upward infinitely, would meet the heavens. Each face mirrors one of the cardinal directions, aligning with the Earth's magnetic and rotational axes. This creates not just visual symmetry, but planetary resonance. The pyramid doesn't just stand on Earth, it participates in Earth's orientation. Its very shape integrates terrestrial and celestial geometry. It is, in a sense, a bridge made of mathematics. That bridge might also be a message. In the same way that a melody can carry emotion without words, geometric form can carry intention without language. To build something perfectly proportioned is to say something about understanding, patience, and the desire for permanence. When ancient builders encoded pi and the golden ratio into their work, they were writing in the universal alphabet of pattern, a script that doesn't erode, doesn't depend on translation, and could, in theory, be read by any mind that understands order. If you wanted to send a message to your creators, or to anyone beyond your culture or even your planet, you couldn't choose a better medium. Stone endures, and geometry speaks across time. It's no wonder that later philosophers like Pythagoras and Plato would treat geometry as divine language. They saw in numbers and shapes the structure of reality itself. To them, understanding geometry was a way to understand God. Plato inscribed above his academy's entrance, "Let no one ignorant of geometry enter here," because he believed that mathematical harmony was the foundation of all wisdom. But centuries before him, the builders of Egypt were already practicing that philosophy without ever needing to write it down. They had turned geometry into architecture, and architecture into expression. The deeper you study their methods, the more you realise how deliberate it all was. The base of the pyramid is level to within a few millimetres across an area the size of several football fields. The sides are not only symmetrical but oriented so precisely that even today, with satellites and GPS, their accuracy challenges replication. Some scholars have suggested they achieved this by observing the stars, marking where certain constellations rose and set, then using those points to find true north. If that's true, then the pyramid's geometry isn't just terrestrial, it's cosmic. Its proportions echo both earth and sky, binding the two in a single equation of stone. There's also evidence that the builders used geometry as a means of storytelling. Hieroglyphs carved within other structures often depict tools like the square, the compass, and the level, not as instruments of measurement, but as symbols of balance and divine creation. The gods themselves were described as measuring out the heavens. To create in their worldview was to measure correctly, to bring order from chaos. The pyramid, therefore, wasn't just a building. It was a story told through proportion, a narrative of creation encoded in dimension and angle. Think of how different that is from how we build now. Modern architecture often prizes efficiency or style, but rarely symbolic meaning. The pyramid, by contrast, had to mean something. Every stone was part of a larger logic. The act of aligning those stones was as important as the result. To build in perfect geometry was to participate in divine reasoning. Perhaps that's why, even today, the structure feels alive with intelligence. Its silence is articulate. It communicates through the precision of its existence. This raises an interesting question. If geometry is a language, who was the intended recipient? Was it meant for gods, for ancestors, for the creators of the world? Or was it meant for us, for future beings capable of recognizing the code? The Egyptians may not have thought in those terms, but the result functions that way. The pyramid remains readable, even without hieroglyphs. You can strip away the context and the message persists. It says, "We understood pattern. We observed the sky. We knew our place in the cosmos, and we built something to prove it." That message isn't confined to Egypt. Across the world, ancient builders spoke similar geometric dialects. The stones at Stonehenge align with solstices. The temples of Teotihuacan mirror planetary orbits. The city of Angkor was designed as a geometric model of the cosmos. Geometry seems to be a recurring bridge between human intention and universal order. Whenever we try to communicate with something greater than ourselves, whether gods or creators or future civilizations, we reach for pattern. It's the one language we're certain the universe itself uses. Modern scientists have recognized this too. When NASA designed the plaques and records sent aboard the Voyager spacecraft, they included diagrams of atomic structure and planetary geometry. They didn't write in English or any human tongue. They used symbols, ratios, and shapes, forms any intelligence might decode. In that sense, we're still doing what the pyramid builders did. We're sending geometric messages into the void, hoping that someone, somewhere, recognizes them and understands that we too know the language of pattern. It's fascinating to consider that perhaps the creators the Egyptians imagined, the forces or beings responsible for life and order, spoke that same language. If you believe, as many ancient cultures did, that creation itself was an act of measurement and harmony, then to build geometrically perfect structures was to converse with the creators on their own terms. The pyramid wasn't shouting into the cosmos, it was harmonizing with it. Its proportions matched the universe's proportions like two instruments tuned to the same pitch. In that harmony lay communication, not through sound, but through resonance of form. Inside the pyramid, that idea becomes physical. The geometry isn't just external. The passageways and chambers follow precise angles and ratios, guiding the visitor through a sequence of narrowing spaces that feel less like corridors and more like transitions. Each room changes the acoustics, the air pressure, even the sense of time. You can't help but feel that it's designed to shift perception, to lead the mind through a progression of understanding. It's a journey written in geometry, an architectural sentence that unfolds as you move. The builders might not have had modern language for psychology or physics, but they knew how to shape experience. Geometry was their syntax of transformation. Some researchers believe the pyramid's internal design mirrors astronomical geometry. The descending passage aligning with certain stars, the proportions matching celestial cycles. If so, then the structure operates like a kind of three-dimensional diagram of the heavens, a model that compresses cosmic order into human scale. Standing inside it would be, in a sense, standing inside the universe's blueprint. And if that's true, then geometry isn't just language, it's translation. The pyramid translates the vastness of the cosmos into a space humans can inhabit, turning incomprehensible immensity into something touchable. To ancient minds, this might have been the very definition of communication with creators. Not speech or signal, but alignment. When your work reflects the same order that shaped the stars, you are in essence speaking back to that order. You're saying, we recognize your pattern and we can mirror it. That's the core of geometry as a language. It's mutual intelligibility between creation and consciousness. It's the meeting point where logic becomes reverence. The more we uncover about the pyramid's construction, the more that idea seems to hold. The precision, the symmetry, the mathematics, they all imply more than function. They imply intention. Even the choice of location appears deliberate. The Giza Plateau sits near the 30th parallel, a latitude that divides the planet almost evenly between pole and pole. The pyramid's position might have been chosen not just for convenience, but for balance, placing it within Earth's own geometry. To the builders, the site itself may have been part of the message, the chosen frequency at which to transmit. And what of us, standing there now trying to read it? We might be the intended receivers even if the senders never imagined us. The pyramid doesn't depend on culture or era. Its proportions remain meaningful across ages. Anyone from any civilization can measure its angles and recognize the same constants. In that sense, geometry has succeeded where language fails. It has carried meaning across time without translation. It has proven that understanding can endure without words, that endurance is perhaps the clearest communication of all. Every number, every ratio, every angle is a statement about comprehension. It tells us that humans once looked at the universe and didn't just see mystery. They saw structure, and they mirrored it. They didn't worship the sky by bowing to it. They worshipped it by replicating its precision. They spoke to their creators by demonstrating that they shared a vocabulary. When the wind moves across the desert and the light hits the pyramid's faces just right, you can almost see that vocabulary come alive. The lines sharpen, the symmetry glows, and for a moment the structure seems less like a ruin and more like an equation mid-sentence, still in the process of saying something. The message isn't in its surface, but in its proportions. The builders may have vanished, but their geometry still speaks. It speaks of understanding, of connection, of the quiet belief that the same order guiding the stars could be expressed in stone. In the end, maybe geometry isn't just a language, it's the oldest form of listening. To build according to its rules is to attune yourself to something larger, to hear the hum of the universe through numbers and lines. The pyramids aren't just messages sent outward, they're also instruments for hearing the echo. Every measurement, every alignment is both expression and reception. They remind us that communication isn't always about transmitting words. Sometimes it's about matching frequencies. So the next time you see the pyramids, whether in a photograph or a dream, try to look at them not as relics but as sentences. Sentences written in the universal grammar of geometry, still unfolding, still resonating, still waiting for us to finish the conversation that began thousands of years ago. When you stand on the Giza Plateau at night, there's a moment when everything slows down. The hum of the day fades, the air cools, and the stars come out with a sharpness that city skies can no longer show. The pyramids take on a different kind of presence in that light. They don't look like tombs anymore, they look like instruments, their surfaces dark and angular against the endless field of constellations. The desert is so quiet that even the smallest sound, a breeze-shifting sand, a distant call, feels amplified. You can almost believe that the stones themselves are listening. And perhaps they are. For as long as they've stood, they've been in constant conversation with the sky above them. The ancient Egyptians didn't separate heaven and earth the way we often do. To them, the stars were not faraway suns or cold points of light. They were living symbols, beings with stories and destinations. Their gods travelled among them. Their kings were promised a place within them. The afterlife wasn't somewhere vague and invisible. It was mapped in the heavens. The night sky was not emptiness. It was order. And that order, like the geometry they built into the pyramids, could be read, measured, and mirrored. The Great Pyramid's alignment to the cardinal directions is precise enough to impress modern astronomers. But its connection to the stars goes deeper than simple navigation. Scholars have long noticed that the three pyramids of Giza mirror the three stars of Orion's belt, Al-Nitak, Al-Nilam, and Mintaka. The correlation isn't perfect, but it's close enough to raise questions. Why that pattern? Why that constellation? In Egyptian mythology, Orion was associated with Osiris, god of the afterlife and rebirth. The Nile mirrored the Milky Way, the sky's great river. The pyramids mirrored Orion's belt, the god's celestial resting place. It was all connected, a map of heaven laid upon the earth, an architecture that turned geography into cosmology. To build in alignment with the stars was more than art or mathematics. It was ritual, a way of harmonizing with the rhythms of creation. The Egyptians observed the sky constantly. Their calendar was born from Sirius, the bright star that heralded the Nile's annual flood. When it appeared on the horizon just before sunrise, it signalled renewal, life, and the turning of the year. That same star, Sirius, was associated with the goddess Isis, consort of Osiris. In the mythic cycle, she found and resurrected her husband, binding the heavens' drama to the earth's seasons. The builders of the pyramids weren't just following tradition, they were embedding those stories into stone, making the heavens permanent on the ground. To understand how deliberate that alignment was, imagine trying to replicate it without modern tools. You would need to watch the stars over years, perhaps decades, noting where they rise and set, how they drift slightly over generations as the Earth's axis wobbles. You would need the patience of astronomers and the precision of engineers, all without telescopes or clocks. Yet they achieved it. Some passages inside the Great Pyramid point directly towards specific stars, including those in Orion and Draco, the celestial serpent. When light from those stars entered the pyramid, it would have illuminated narrow shafts, tiny tunnels of stone perfectly angled through hundreds of feet of structure. These weren't random features, they were sightlines, messages sent and received in the language of light. It's humbling to think of what that meant to the people who built them. Every night they would see the same sky we see, but through a completely different lens. Where we see distance, they saw destiny. Where we see data, they saw divinity. Their relationship with the stars wasn't about curiosity alone, it was about continuity. The heavens were the domain of their gods, and by aligning their monuments with that domain, they were ensuring that divine attention would fall upon them, that the journey of the soul would follow the same pathways the stars traced. In that sense, the pyramids are both observatories and prayers. They don't just point toward the stars, they participate in them. Each angle, each alignment, each proportion is a form of resonance. The light of Orion touches the apex, the glow of Sirius reflects off the stones, and in that exchange, the builders believed communication was achieved, not through words, not through images, but through geometry and illumination. The universe to them wasn't silent, it was responsive. If you built correctly, if you honoured the order of things, the cosmos would notice. That idea might sound mystical, but it has roots in something deeply logical. The ancient Egyptians were some of the first people to think systematically about cycles, of time, of nature, of the heavens. They understood that the same stars returned every night, that the same constellations rose in predictable patterns. They built that predictability into their worldview. By mapping their monuments to the heavens, they created an architecture of repetition. Each year when certain stars appeared, light would fall on certain corridors. The pyramid would come alive with alignment, reenacting cosmic order. It was a kind of dialogue between human design and universal rhythm. Modern archaeologists sometimes refer to this as astroarchitecture, the deliberate integration of celestial phenomena into structural design. But for the Egyptians, it wasn't an academic term, it was devotion. They weren't studying the stars to measure them, they were honouring them as mirrors of their own fate. And in that honouring they created something extraordinary, a physical medium for cosmic conversation. The stones themselves became instruments of alignment, tuned to the frequencies of the sky. If you stand far enough away, you can see how this conversation unfolds. The 3 pyramids of Giza stretch across the plateau like a frozen constellation. To the south, the Nile curves gently, reflecting the Milky Way's arc. The horizon glows faintly where the desert meets the stars. It's almost as if the entire landscape was arranged to echo the heavens. That echo isn't perfect. It's slightly offset, slightly distorted, the way a reflection wavers on the surface of water. But that imperfection might be part of the message. Maybe the builders weren't trying to reproduce the sky exactly. Maybe they were grounding it, anchoring it to earth so that the divine could touch the mortal. You can feel that grounding when you walk between the pyramids. The stones are massive, but their arrangement is delicate. The spaces between them create channels for wind and light. At certain times of day, sunlight slices through those gaps, illuminating the walls with moving stripes of brightness. At night, the same effect happens in reverse, with moonlight and starlight glinting between edges. It's as though the structures are breathing in and out with the sky, absorbing its light, returning it, keeping the dialogue alive. For all their scale, the pyramids are incredibly sensitive instruments. The accuracy required to align them to the stars means that even slight shifts in foundation or angle would throw off the connection. Over millennia, erosion and earthquakes have altered them, but their fundamental orientation remains true. Even now, after all that time, they still face the same stars, still participate in the same celestial geometry. That continuity feels almost miraculous. We often think of communication as something fleeting, a signal sent, received, and forgotten. The pyramids prove that communication can also be eternal. Their signal doesn't fade, it's carved into the rotation of the Earth itself. Some modern researchers have gone further, suggesting that the pyramids might have functioned as observatories, capable of marking solstices, equinoxes, and stellar transits. The precision of their design allows for such interpretations. A beam of sunlight or starlight entering through a specific shaft on a specific night could have signalled the start of a season or a religious festival. But beyond the practical, there's something poetic in that arrangement. Imagine being a priest or astronomer thousands of years ago, standing inside a vast chamber, waiting for a single point of starlight to appear. That moment would have been more than observation. It would have been communion, the universe acknowledging the builders, however briefly, with a flash of light. Even today, astronomers use pyramidal geometry in observatories and telescopes. The principle of alignment hasn't changed, only the instruments have. We still turn our attention upward, still calibrate our tools to the motion of the stars, still try to read their language. The difference is that we do it with data instead of devotion. Yet in a quiet way, we're continuing the same conversation. Every time a telescope captures light from a distant galaxy, we're participating in the dialogue the pyramid builders began. They built with stone, we build with glass and metal. But both are ways of listening. There's a deeper connection too. When scientists study cosmic background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang, they're essentially studying the same thing the Egyptians revered: light as the carrier of creation. The difference is in interpretation. We see physics, they saw divinity, but both are forms of respect for the order of the cosmos. Both stem from the same recognition, that the universe is structured, that it can be understood, and that understanding it brings us closer to its source. The pyramids are the earliest enduring expression of that recognition. They are the first great instruments of cosmic listening. Over time, the meanings we attach to them have changed. To early travellers, they were wonders of engineering. To mystics, they were repositories of hidden power. To archaeologists, they are puzzles of labour and logistics. But beneath all those interpretations lies something simpler, a dialogue between human consciousness and the stars. The form of that dialogue doesn't need to be mystical to be profound. It can be as straightforward as this. We looked up, we saw order, and we answered in kind. We built structures that reflected that order, so that creation could see itself reflected in us. There's something quietly moving about that idea. The pyramids aren't monuments of domination or conquest. They're monuments of participation. They don't try to control the cosmos. They try to harmonize with it. Each block, each alignment, each reflection of starlight is a gesture of inclusion, a way of saying, we too are part of this. And that's perhaps why they still affect us so deeply. Even if we no longer share the same cosmology, we recognize the impulse. When we look at the night sky, we feel that same pull to understand, to belong, to connect. If you stay long enough, the stars above Giza begin to shift. Orion moves westward, Sirius brightens and fades. The same patterns the builders watched still play out with perfect predictability. The earth turns, the sky responds, and the stones remain steady. It's a choreography millions of years old, one that will continue long after our own constructions have crumbled. The pyramids don't interrupt that dance, they join it. Their apexes trace invisible lines across the heavens, as if keeping time with the stars' slow motion. In that sense, they are more than monuments. They are metronomes, keeping the rhythm of cosmic music. Imagine for a moment that there really were creators, beings or forces that shaped life on this planet and moved on. If they were watching, what would they see when they looked back? Perhaps they would see these three perfect shapes glinting in the desert sun, aligned precisely with the stars they once set in motion. Maybe they would recognize the message instantly, that the beings they had shaped had learned to speak back in the only language that endures, the language of pattern, the language of light, the language written in stone. And so, the pyramids continue their conversation, night after night, as they have for nearly 5,000 years. The stars drift, the sands shift, civilizations rise and fall, but the dialogue remains unbroken. The stones keep speaking, the stars keep answering. Somewhere in that exchange lies everything humanity has ever tried to say, to the gods, to the cosmos, to whoever might be listening. And perhaps the message is simple. We noticed you. We learned your language. We built something that could speak it back. If you stand close enough to the Great Pyramid, the illusion of simplicity begins to fade. From a distance, it looks almost abstract. 4 clean faces converging to a point, a single thought rendered in stone. But up close, it becomes a labyrinth of precision. Each block is slightly different in shape. Every surface cut to fit another with improbable accuracy. You start to realize that this wasn't built by chance or brute force alone. It follows a plan so detailed that even now, thousands of years later, we struggle to fully understand it. Somewhere inside that order lies what many have come to call the builder's hidden blueprint. That phrase suggests mystery, but perhaps it's not a secret in the conspiratorial sense. Maybe it's hidden only because we've forgotten how to read the language it's written in. The people who designed these structures didn't think of blueprints as paper drawings or sketches. For them, the plan was embedded in proportion, in measurement, in the relationship between earth, sky, and structure. Every line they carved, every angle they chose, was part of an equation that bound the human world to the cosmic one. They didn't build the pyramids as isolated monuments. They built them as instruments within a larger pattern, a system meant to interact with the forces around it. When modern engineers analyse the Great Pyramid, they often marvel at its accuracy. The base is nearly perfectly square. The sides are aligned almost exactly to true north, with an error of less than 1/20th of a degree. The height, before erosion, created a ratio to the base that encodes the value of pi, and perhaps even the golden ratio phi. Some dismiss these as coincidences, but coincidences don't usually repeat themselves so precisely. Over and over, the numbers line up too neatly to ignore. The more you look, the more it feels as if the pyramid is not just a building, but a statement, a mathematical sentence written in limestone. If it is a statement, then it must have authors. Who were they really? We tend to imagine vast armies of labourers dragging blocks across the desert, directed by overseers under the watchful eye of a pharaoh. But evidence suggests something more sophisticated. The workers who built these structures weren't slaves. They were skilled craftspeople, engineers and stonemasons who lived in organised communities nearby. Excavations have uncovered bakeries, workshops and housing complexes that indicate planning, care and even pride. These people weren't simply constructing a royal tomb, they were participating in a sacred project, one that might have felt as important as life itself. The knowledge that guided them came from generations of observation. The Egyptians were meticulous recorders of cycles, the flood of the Nile, the movements of the stars, the phases of the moon. They noticed patterns long before they understood why they existed, and from those patterns they derived meaning. Their mathematics grew out of measurement, measuring land, time and the heavens. Over centuries, those measurements merged into something approaching a science of harmony. They built according to principles that balance function, symbolism, and cosmology, all woven into a single plan. What makes the pyramids different from other ancient structures isn't just their size, but their intention. Temples and palaces are meant to be used. They invite human presence. The pyramids, by contrast, seem to have been built for something beyond practical purpose. You can walk through their passages, but you can't occupy them in the usual sense. Their geometry and materials suggest function, but not one we fully grasp. Some researchers have suggested acoustic properties, that the chambers resonate at certain frequencies. Others propose electromagnetic phenomena, that the pyramid's shape interacts with the Earth's energy fields. These ideas remain speculative, but they point toward an intriguing truth. The builders might have understood that matter, sound and energy are all interconnected. Their blueprint could have been multi-dimensional, physical, harmonic and symbolic all at once. Inside the pyramid, those layers become tangible. The grand gallery rises with precise angles, its ceiling narrowing as it ascends, creating a funnel-like resonance chamber. The stones are polished so smoothly that sound behaves differently inside than outside. Every footstep echoes with an unnatural sharpness. Even without modern instruments, the builders must have sensed this. The acoustics feel deliberate, not incidental. It's possible that chanting, drumming, or even silence itself could have been part of the ritual experience within. The design might have been calculated not just for strength or beauty, but for vibration, a blueprint for sound as much as for structure. In recent years, researchers using advanced scanning technology have discovered hidden voids within the Great Pyramid, empty spaces above known chambers that don't appear in earlier maps. They're not random gaps or collapsed areas. They're symmetrical, intentional, as if designed to relieve pressure or perhaps to serve some unknown function. One of these voids, a vast space nearly the size of a jetliner, sits high above the Grand Gallery. Its purpose remains unknown. To some, it's just a structural feature. To others, it's another part of the hidden blueprint, a cavity designed to balance, amplify, or store something intangible. Whether energy, sound, or symbolism, we can only speculate, but the precision suggests purpose. What kind of mind imagines something like that? To plan a structure that complex, you'd need not only geometry, but foresight. You'd need to understand how materials behave, how pressure distributes, how weight transfers through stone. Modern engineers can model those forces with software, but the Egyptians did it with intuition and experience. They worked by feel and by rule, guided by a tradition of craft that translated directly from nature. When they built, they weren't imposing shape on the world. They were extending the world's own geometry. The blueprint in that sense wasn't invented, it was discovered. That idea changes how we think about the builders. They weren't following instructions handed down from on high, nor were they blindly serving a ruler's ego. They were participating in an act of translation, taking the language of the cosmos and expressing it through matter. Every measurement was both technical and symbolic. A cubit wasn't just a unit of length, it was a measure tied to the human body, to the rhythm of life itself. When they scaled that unit up to build pyramids, they were expanding the human form into cosmic proportion. The result was a structure that joined the micro and the macro, the human and the divine through mathematics. That may have been the true hidden blueprint, not a secret plan, but a philosophy encoded in design. The more one studies the pyramid, the more that philosophy reveals itself. The angles of its faces divide the sky evenly between east and west, symbolizing balance. The shape's convergence represents ascent, a metaphor for spiritual transformation. The use of granite in the king's chamber introduces magnetic properties, suggesting an awareness of how materials interact with invisible forces. Even the choice of location, near the meeting of desert and river, reflects equilibrium, dryness and fertility, death and life. The blueprint isn't a single diagram, it's an integration of opposites. That kind of balance feels intentional, not accidental. It's the signature of minds who saw creation as a system, not as chaos. Sometimes the most striking evidence of the builder's hidden knowledge comes not from the pyramids themselves, but from what surrounds them. The entire Giza complex is laid out with astonishing precision. The pyramids align not only with each other, but with the Nile, the rising and setting of the sun, and the constellation of Orion. The Sphinx sits positioned as if to guard or observe, its gaze fixed toward the east where the sun rises on the equinox. These relationships form a vast geometric network, an earthly reflection of celestial order. When viewed from above, it looks less like a random arrangement of monuments and more like a circuit, a system built to channel forces between earth and sky. Of course, we can't be sure what the builders believed those forces were. To them, the language of gods and the language of physics were the same. Energy, spirit, and geometry were all expressions of the same order. When they built, they were cooperating with that order, not trying to control it. The pyramid then was less a machine and more a mediator, a point of contact where creation and consciousness could meet. Its blueprint wasn't about domination of nature, but synchronization with it. That distinction matters because it reveals a worldview we've mostly lost, one that sees intelligence woven into matter itself. It's easy to imagine the overseers tracing lines in the sand before construction began, marking angles with ropes and stakes, aligning them to stars they had charted across the seasons. The night before the first stone was laid, perhaps they stood quietly, watching Orion rise, ensuring that the pattern matched what they intended. There's a kind of humility in that image. People looking up for guidance, not down for instruction. The blueprint wasn't drawn on parchment. It was written in the stars. To build according to that celestial plan was to honour creation by mirroring it. Even the choice of scale reflects that mirroring. The pyramid's immense size isn't excess, it's precision amplified. To construct something that massive with that degree of accuracy requires not chaos, but clarity. Each block's placement mattered, each layer's height calculated to maintain proportion. The builders didn't work from improvisation. They worked from an internalised logic. When modern engineers attempt to recreate their methods, they often underestimate that logic. They look for lost technologies or tools, but perhaps the real tool was understanding itself, a refined awareness of how nature behaves when shaped correctly. If the hidden blueprint had a purpose beyond architecture, it might have been transformation, of the physical, the spiritual, or even the planetary. Some theorists suggest that the pyramid's proportions were designed to stabilize energy, to balance electromagnetic fields, or to amplify resonance from the Earth. While such claims remain unproven, the intuition behind them reveals something profound. The sense that the builders were working with forces larger than themselves. They might not have thought in terms of physics, but they understood harmony. The idea that stone could interact with the unseen wasn't superstition to them. It was observation, the result of thousands of years watching how the universe behaves when aligned correctly. You can almost picture them testing those alignments, using simple tools, sighting rods, plumb lines, water levels, to find balance points. Each adjustment would have been both physical and symbolic, refining not just the structure but the meaning. To an outside observer, it might have looked like construction. To them, it was conversation. Every measurement, every recalibration was a question asked to the cosmos. Is this right? Are we aligned? And when the lines matched, when the stars rose exactly where they should, perhaps they felt they'd received an answer. That's what makes the hidden blueprint so compelling. It wasn't hidden because it was secret. It was hidden because it was experiential. You can't write it down. You have to build it, stand within it, feel it. When the wind moves through the passages or when sunlight strikes the apex, the pyramid reveals parts of its design not through diagrams but through sensation. The blueprint lives in the interaction between material and environment, in shadow, temperature, sound, and time. That's not a code you decipher on paper, it's a relationship you experience in space. Even now, we might still be uncovering its layers. The scanning technologies that reveal new chambers are only the beginning. As methods evolve, we may find patterns we can't yet imagine, subtle densities, acoustic paths, or energy interactions invisible to the naked eye. But maybe the ultimate discovery won't be technological at all. Maybe it will be recognition, that the hidden blueprint isn't lost, it's universal. The same principles that guided those ancient builders still guide the universe: balance, resonance, proportion, and connection. We've just forgotten how to see them as sacred. The wind still carries dust across the plateau, the same way it did when those first stones were placed. The stars still rise over the horizon, marking time with patient precision. The pyramid remains, its purpose debated but its message unchanged. Whether we see it as a tomb, a temple, or a transmitter, its design tells us one thing clearly. The builders knew how to listen. They listened to the earth, to the sky, to the invisible logic that holds everything together. Their blueprint was not just for construction, but for communication. Not with words, but with the quiet language of alignment. And perhaps that's the real hidden message. The pyramid's design isn't trying to tell us what to think. It's showing us how to think. Patiently, precisely, in harmony with the larger pattern that makes life possible. The blueprint is a reminder that knowledge and reverence were never separate. To build something perfect was to understand creation. To understand creation was to participate in it. And somewhere deep within those layers of stone, that understanding still hums, not as mystery, but as memory. When you step inside the Great Pyramid, the air changes. It feels heavier, somehow denser, like the sound itself is different here. Even a whisper seems to cling to the walls before fading. The temperature stays steady, cooler than the desert outside, as if the stone remembers the night and keeps it. There's no wind, no birds, no shifting sand, only stillness. Yet within that stillness, something subtle moves. If you breathe quietly enough, you can almost sense a hum beneath the silence, a vibration too low to hear, too constant to vanish. It's as if the building itself is alive in a way that has nothing to do with motion. The pyramid doesn't speak in words, it speaks in resonance. Sound behaves differently here. That much is measurable. In the king's chamber, made entirely of solid granite, tones linger longer than they should. The reverberation lasts, reflecting off each polished surface, creating an acoustic pattern that amplifies certain frequencies. Some researchers have measured a resonant peak near 440 Hz, roughly the pitch of the note A. Others claim additional harmonics emerge when sounds are produced simultaneously, as if the room itself responds like an instrument. You can almost picture the builders testing that, humming or chanting until the walls began to sing back. To them, that would have meant the geometry was right, the structure complete, the message tuned. Ancient people didn't separate sound from energy. To them, vibration was creation. In the Egyptian cosmogony, the universe began not with light, but with voice. The first utterance, the divine word that brought order out of chaos. The god Ptah was said to have spoken the world into being. In that worldview, every sound carried power, every tone shaped reality. The vibrations of music, language, and even thought were seen as parts of the same continuum. To build a resonant chamber inside a pyramid wasn't a coincidence. It was a reflection of their belief that the physical and the spiritual vibrate together. Modern science, in its own way, confirms what they intuited. Everything vibrates. Matter, at its most fundamental level, is energy in oscillation, atoms moving, waves overlapping, frequencies interacting. The universe itself hums with background radiation, a constant low-frequency resonance left over from the birth of everything. We're immersed in vibration, even when we can't hear it. The Egyptians couldn't have known about atomic structure or cosmic background noise, but they observed enough of nature to understand that movement and rhythm underlie all existence. When they built chambers that responded to sound, they were engaging with that principle directly, shaping spaces that could interact with vibration. Some researchers have suggested that the pyramid's internal design may have been intentionally tuned. The corridors, galleries, and chambers form a network of echo paths that focus and direct sound waves. When sound travels through those passages, it doesn't simply bounce. It amplifies, overlaps, and sometimes cancels itself, creating standing waves, patterns of resonance that remain fixed in space. If you were to sing or chant at the right pitch, certain frequencies would build upon themselves, creating an audible and even tactile effect. The air would seem to thicken, the floor to tremble faintly beneath your feet. To experience that in total darkness, surrounded by millions of tons of stone, would have felt otherworldly. It would have felt like communication with something vast. The idea of using sound as a bridge between worlds wasn't unique to Egypt. In temples of India, in Greek amphitheatres, in Mayan pyramids, ancient architects shaped spaces that respond acoustically. The Maya, for example, designed the Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza, so that a clap at its base produces an echo resembling the chirp of a sacred bird. The architects may have discovered this through trial and error, but the result is the same: sound turned into message. The Egyptians might have achieved something similar, though subtler, less spectacle, more symphony. Inside the Great Pyramid, sound doesn't reflect randomly. It circulates, as if following a plan. That circulation might have been the key to its purpose. Consider what happens when vibrations meet structure. Every material has its natural frequency, the rate at which it prefers to vibrate. Glass, metal, stone, each responds differently. When sound waves strike them at that frequency, resonance occurs. Energy transfers efficiently, amplifying both sound and vibration. The granite of the king's chamber has a particularly high density, meaning it can carry vibration long distances without losing energy. When struck, it rings faintly, like a deep bell. It's possible that the builders noticed this property and designed the chamber to enhance it. The pyramid could have been engineered not just as a monument, but as a resonant device, an amplifier for sound, energy, or perhaps even intention. That word, intention, feels important here. Ancient rituals often used chanting or drumming to induce altered states, to bridge the gap between human perception and the divine. The repetitive rhythm of sound changes brain activity, synchronizing neural oscillations and slowing heart rate. In modern terms, that's entrainment, the tendency of systems to fall into rhythm with one another. Two pendulums placed side by side will eventually swing in sync. The same principle applies to sound and mind. When a space vibrates at a particular frequency, those who occupy it begin to resonate with it too. The builders might not have described it scientifically, but they knew it experientially. They could feel it. The pyramid wasn't just architecture, it was environment as instrument. If that's true, then sound wasn't merely decoration or ceremony, it was the medium of connection. Imagine priests standing inside the chamber, chanting low tones that rise and fall in perfect unison. The vibrations travel through their bodies, into the stone, and back again. Each sound wave reinforces the next until the entire room seems to breathe. The participants would feel their own voices merging with the structure, their boundaries dissolving. In that moment, the pyramid becomes more than a building. It becomes an interface between the human and the cosmic, translating thought into vibration and vibration into communion. Some scientists exploring this idea today use sensitive microphones and vibration sensors to map how sound moves through the pyramid. The data reveals complex interference patterns, as if the space were designed to balance resonance at multiple frequencies. When tones are played, certain areas amplify while others remain silent. It's not random. It's geometric. The shape itself determines the acoustic response. That's why, even after thousands of years, the pyramid still works. Its harmony is built into its proportions. You could remove the priests, the rituals, even the culture that created it, and the resonance would remain. That permanence makes it a kind of fossilized music, frozen vibration preserved in stone. The relationship between sound and structure goes even deeper. Modern physics recognizes that vibration can influence matter dramatically. In the study of cymatics, the visualization of sound, vibrations passing through sand or water create intricate geometric patterns. Certain tones produce circles, triangles, or even spirals. The shapes shift predictably with frequency, suggesting that sound naturally organizes matter into order. Ancient builders may have observed similar effects in the world around them, the way sound carries through drums, water, or tools. To them, it would have been evidence that sound has form, that vibration can shape reality. The pyramid, then, could be seen as a monumental experiment in cymatics, a structure built to explore how resonance interacts with matter and spirit alike. There's another layer to this idea, one that connects sound to time. Vibrations are rhythmic. They repeat. Every tone has a frequency, a number of cycles per second. When those cycles sync with natural rhythms, heartbeats, breathing, planetary rotations, they create harmony. The Egyptians understood cycles intimately. Their entire civilization revolved around recurring patterns: the annual flooding of the Nile, the rising of Sirius, the journey of the sun god Ra across the sky each day. Building a resonant structure might have been their way of joining those rhythms, embedding human creation into cosmic tempo. To stand inside the pyramid and feel it vibrate would be to feel time itself passing through you, measured not in seconds but in waves. Modern studies of sound and consciousness lend unexpected support to this intuition. Certain frequencies are known to influence brainwave patterns, promoting calm or focus. Deep, steady tones encourage slower rhythms in the brain, producing states of relaxation or meditation. When multiple tones combine at slightly different frequencies, they create beats, pulsations that can alter perception. It's possible that ancient rituals using sound inside resonant spaces achieved similar effects. The builders might have discovered through experience that specific tones could quiet the mind or evoke transcendence. They wouldn't have called it neuroscience, they would have called it communion. But the mechanism might have been the same: vibration as a bridge between the physical and the mental, between the measurable and the mystical. In this light, the pyramid becomes both symbol and tool. Its geometry ensures stability, its materials ensure resonance, and its internal dimensions shape experience. The blueprint we spoke of earlier might have been designed precisely for this purpose, to create a space where sound behaves differently, where ordinary perception shifts. The act of building such a space was itself a form of knowledge. To construct something that resonates with the universe is to demonstrate understanding of its principles, and to use that resonance deliberately is to converse with creation on its own terms. It's worth remembering that to the Egyptians the human voice was sacred. Words were not just communication, they were magic. The right sequence of sounds could bless, curse, or transform. Priests trained for years to perfect pronunciation, rhythm, and tone. When they spoke the names of gods, those names were believed to awaken the powers they described. In such a culture, architecture that amplifies and purifies sound would be immensely powerful. The pyramid might have served as the ultimate amplifier of sacred speech, magnifying human intention until it reached the frequency of the divine. Even without belief, the physics alone are remarkable. When sound vibrates within a confined space, it produces pressure zones, areas where energy concentrates. The pyramid's chambers, with their converging angles, could focus those zones much like a lens focuses light. The result would be localized pockets of intense vibration, perceptible as throbbing or warmth. Ancient participants might have interpreted that as presence, a sign that their prayers or chants had been received. In a sense, they wouldn't have been wrong. The structure was responding quite literally to their voices. The resonance they felt was both physical and symbolic, the universe acknowledging their call through the behavior of matter. Over the centuries that understanding faded. The ritual stopped, the chambers fell silent, and the resonance became metaphor. But even now the pyramid's acoustic properties persist. Visitors who hum softly inside still hear their voices transformed, stretched and strengthened until they sound not quite human. The air itself seems to sing. It's a strange, intimate reminder that the builder's design continues to function, long after the meanings have changed. The stones still remember the frequencies that once filled them. They still wait for sound. Perhaps that's what the builders intended, that long after their civilization vanished, the pyramid would continue to participate in the language of vibration. The sound of the wind moving across its faces, the rumble of distant thunder, the low tremor of Earth itself, all of it passes through the same geometry, resonating faintly, imperceptibly, keeping the conversation alive. The message isn't lost, it's ongoing. It doesn't depend on translation. It exists wherever vibration exists, which is everywhere. And maybe, in that endless hum, lies the essence of their communication with the creators. Not words or symbols, but resonance itself, the universal medium that connects all things. The builders might have believed, consciously or not, that by creating a structure that vibrates in harmony with earth and sky, they were participating in the same process that sustains the cosmos. To align with vibration is to align with life. Every cell, every planet, every atom moves according to the same principle. The pyramid simply makes that motion visible, audible, tangible. As the night deepens outside and the stars continue their silent arcs above the desert, the stones hold their tone. The pyramid's resonance merges with the low hum of the earth, blending with the invisible soundscape of existence. And though we may no longer hear it clearly, it continues. The oldest frequency of all, structure speaking to sky, creation replying through vibration, a dialogue older than words and quieter than breath. When you touch the stone of the pyramid, it feels cold at first. Even under the sun, the limestone holds its temperature, slow to change, indifferent to the heat that scorches the air around it. The surface is rough now, weathered by time and wind, but in places, especially where fragments of the original casing remain, the smoothness is startling. You can imagine how it must have looked when it was new, polished, luminous, reflecting sunlight so intensely that it would have glowed like a beacon. That glow would have been visible for miles, a radiance of stone capturing the light of the sky. It wasn't just beauty, it was communication, and perhaps, even more deeply, it was memory. Stone remembers differently from us. Our memories live in neurons, delicate patterns of electricity and chemistry, fading with time, fragile and mutable. But stone remembers through endurance. It records by remaining. Its memory isn't of moments, but of presence. It keeps shape, position, and pressure. It holds the record of everything that has touched it, the weight of footsteps, the erosion of wind, the echo of voices once heard within it. The pyramids have been absorbing such impressions for thousands of years. Every sound that has passed through their chambers, every vibration from the earth beneath them, every shift in temperature and air has left a trace. Not in the way a human remembers, but in the subtle reconfiguration of matter that time inevitably writes into all things. When we talk about the memory within the stone, it's easy to drift toward mysticism, but there's also a physical truth behind the phrase. Materials store information in their structure. Stress, heat, vibration, and radiation all alter atomic arrangements. In crystalline materials like granite and limestone, those changes can persist for eons. Scientists use this property to measure the age of rocks through trapped electrons, to reconstruct past climates from isotopic ratios, even to record data at microscopic scales. In a literal sense, the stones of the pyramids are archives, repositories of environmental history. They contain the memory of sunlight absorbed thousands of years ago, of pressure from the stones above, of seismic tremors long since forgotten by living beings. If you could read that memory, the pyramid would tell you the entire story of its existence, moment by moment, particle by particle. But there's another kind of memory at play here, one less about physics and more about intention. When the builders carved and placed each block, they imbued it with meaning. The act itself was ritual, repetition turned into purpose. Every strike of the chisel, every measured placement, every chant that accompanied the labour embedded human will into the structure. To build something so massive and precise required more than muscle. It required focus sustained over generations. That collective effort, that long continuous intention, lingers. Even if we strip away all mysticism, we can sense it. Standing near the pyramid, you feel the weight not just of stone but of concentration, of discipline, of memory externalized in matter. It's the physical embodiment of remembering what's important. Balance, order, permanence. To the Egyptians, stone wasn't inert. It was alive in a way that modern thought has mostly forgotten. Their word for stone, inar, carried associations with strength, stability, and divine presence. Temples and statues were not merely representations of gods, they were manifestations inhabited by spirit through ritual. When they spoke of a statue living, they meant it quite literally. The belief wasn't that the stone symbolized life, but that it could contain it. The same logic extended to the pyramids. They were more than tombs. They were vessels, containers of energy, memory and transformation. Their endurance wasn't just physical survival, it was the continuation of purpose. In this worldview, the builders weren't only shaping matter, they were shaping consciousness. The pyramid's form and function were designed to interact with both. The alignment of the stars, the internal chambers, the resonance of sound, all of it created a system that linked material and immaterial. The stone held memory. The vibration awakened it. Rituals conducted inside might have been ways of activating the structure, of reminding the stone of its role in the cosmic order. For them, forgetting wasn't a failure of mind. It was a disruption of harmony. Remembering on every scale was the restoration of balance. The pyramid itself could be seen as a tool for cosmic remembrance, a monument ensuring that creation never forgets itself. Modern science, though it uses different language, hints at something similar. Memory is not confined to brains, it's a universal process. Atoms retain the record of energy states. DNA preserves the instructions of life across millennia. Even light carries the imprint of events billions of years old, travelling through space as the visible past. In that sense, the universe is one vast memory field, constantly recording itself. The pyramids participate in that process as Earth's longest-standing recorders, silent, stable, still echoing the energies that built them. When you look closely at their stones, you can see how that memory manifests physically. Each block bears tiny marks, tool traces, scratches, the faint outlines of workers' inscriptions. These are human signatures left in the texture of geology. They're the fingerprints of individuals long gone, preserved not in writing but in craftsmanship. A hand once guided that chisel, a breath once filled that worker's lungs. Those moments are gone, yet their evidence remains, stored in the exact arrangement of atoms on a surface. The pyramid is not only a record of an idea, it is a record of human effort, of people remembering how to build in perfect alignment and refusing to let that knowledge fade. There's a quiet poetry in that. The builders might not have thought of themselves as creating a message for the future, but they did. The very durability of their work guarantees that we, thousands of years later, are still in dialogue with them. Their memory has outlived language, culture, and empire. It has survived everything but time itself, and even time has been gentle with it. In a way, the pyramid has achieved what humans always seek: continuity. It continues to exist, to communicate, to hold meaning, long after the context has vanished. The Egyptians had a word for this kind of continuity: jet. It meant everlasting existence, not in the abstract sense of eternity, but as unending presence. Jet was the mode of time in which gods and monuments existed. The opposite, nehe, was cyclical time, the time of living beings, of day and night, of growth and decay. Together they formed a complete view of reality, one temporal, one timeless. The pyramid stood at the intersection of both, a bridge between movement and stillness. It remembered so that we could forget, and by forgetting, rediscover. That was its paradox, to exist outside of time while embodying the memory of it. The idea that stone can carry meaning isn't just ancient superstition. Even in modern engineering, materials are understood to have memory. Metals change behaviour after being bent and restored, remembering the stress. Crystals realign after exposure to vibration, recalling their previous states. These aren't metaphors, they're measurable phenomena. Matter remembers force, and energy leaves traces. The difference between science and spirituality is often only one of interpretation. Where we see data, they saw spirit. Where we see physics, they saw participation. The pyramid embodies both views simultaneously, science as reverence, reverence as science. Imagine for a moment that you could slow time down enough to watch those stones record their history. You'd see sunlight photons embedding their energy into the outer layers, wind carrying microscopic particles that etch tiny patterns, temperature cycles expanding and contracting the stone surface, leaving molecular scars. Every second, something changes imperceptibly, accumulating into a vast memory of existence. The pyramid doesn't resist time, it collaborates with it. Its longevity isn't defiance, it's partnership. The builders didn't try to stop decay, they built in a way that allowed endurance through equilibrium. The structure breathes with temperature, settles with gravity, and weathers with grace. Its survival is an ongoing negotiation between memory and impermanence. There's also a human dimension to this idea. When we build, we project ourselves forward. Every creation, from a book to a bridge, is an attempt to be remembered, to leave a trace that says, "We were here." The pyramids are the ultimate expression of that impulse. They carry not just the memory of individuals, but of an entire world view, one that saw creation as a collaboration between humanity and the cosmos. In their endurance, they remind us of that relationship. The builders may be gone, but the conversation continues, encoded in stone and geometry and alignment. Standing inside one of the chambers surrounded by silence, it's easy to feel that continuity. The stillness isn't empty, it's full of resonance, a low vibration of time compressed. Every surface holds the imprint of centuries, the breath of explorers, the torches of priests, the dust of generations. You're surrounded by memory in its most physical form. It humbles you, it slows your thoughts, makes you aware of your own impermanence against the permanence of stone. That awareness isn't despair, it's connection. You become part of the same record, another fleeting trace absorbed into the long memory of the monument. Even in myth, memory and stone are bound together. Across cultures, monuments are described as living witnesses, keepers of truth. In Greek myth, Mnemosyne, the goddess of memory, is mother to the muses, meaning all creativity and knowledge spring from remembering. In Egyptian belief, memory was tied to the heart, not the mind. At judgment, the heart was weighed against the feather of truth. A heavy heart meant guilt, a burden of forgotten order. To remember was to be light, to be aligned with Ma'at. The pyramid, as a structure of perfect order, embodied that alignment physically. Its stones remembered balance so that human souls could follow that pattern spiritually. Over time, the physical and symbolic blurred. The pyramid became not only a vessel of the pharaoh's spirit, but a model for cosmic regeneration. Its enduring form was proof that harmony could survive decay. Its memory was both literal and metaphorical, a stable point around which the transient world revolved. That duality might be the most profound aspect of its design. It doesn't just hold memory, it teaches it. It shows, by existing, what it means to persist in equilibrium. If you return to the idea that the pyramids might have been built to communicate with their creators, the memory within the stone takes on another layer of meaning. Perhaps the builders believed that endurance itself was a form of message, a statement that humanity had learned stability, order, and permanence, that it could mirror divine creation not through words, but through action. To create something that lasts beyond death is to speak the language of gods, who, in their mythology, existed beyond time. The pyramid, in this sense, is a sentence written in the dialect of eternity. Every grain of sand in the desert eventually moves, carried by the wind, reshaped by time. Yet the pyramid stands. That stability is not just physical triumph, it's philosophical declaration. It says that meaning can be preserved, that memory can outlive mortality. And in that endurance lies communication. The builders might have hoped that someday, whoever or whatever created the world would look down and recognize the effort, a reflection of their own order made visible. Even now, as modern instruments probe its depths and scientists scan its interior, the pyramid continues to keep its silence. It doesn't yield all its secrets easily. That restraint feels deliberate, as if the monument itself understands that some knowledge must remain embodied, not explained. Perhaps that's what the builders understood most profoundly, that the deepest forms of memory aren't stored in text or image, but in the persistence of form. The pyramid remembers by existing. And so, as the night stretches over Giza and starlight once again settles on its ancient surfaces, the stones continue their long act of recollection. They remember the hands that placed them, the songs that echoed between them, the weight of centuries pressing down. They remember the alignment to Orion and Sirius, the floods of the Nile, the first explorers' footsteps, and now the gaze of satellites far above. The pyramid remains the memory of humanity made solid, stone that listens, stone that endures, stone that remembers what we have forgotten, that permanence, in its truest form, is not stillness, but balance. When the builders of the Great Pyramid measured the land, they weren't simply dividing ground into units. They were drawing meaning from the act of measurement itself. Every length, every angle, every ratio was chosen with purpose, as if each number carried a message waiting to be uncovered. To them, measurement wasn't just mathematics, it was revelation. They believed the structure of the world could be expressed through proportion, and that by reproducing those proportions in their monuments, they could harmonize with creation itself. In that sense, every stone of the pyramid was part of a conversation between number and nature, each measurement a sentence in a language older than writing. The more closely modern researchers examine the dimensions of the pyramids, the stranger those sentences become. Take the Great Pyramid. Its base length is roughly 230.4 meters, and its original height was about 146.6 meters. When you divide the perimeter of the base by its height, the result approximates 2p, the ratio of a circle's circumference to its radius. It's a relationship between linear and circular geometry, between the square and the circle, between Earth and the heavens. Whether by intention or intuition, the builders captured a constant that defines all motion and all orbits. It's as if they took the mathematics of a sphere and translated it into the language of stone. Some dismiss this as coincidence, but the precision is too exact, the pattern too consistent to ignore. Across the Giza complex, measurements reflect repeating ratios of Earth's dimensions, of celestial cycles, of universal constants. The Great Pyramid's proportions seem to encode the planet's polar radius, its equatorial circumference, and even the distance between Earth and the Sun, all expressed through scale. The idea that an ancient civilization could know such measurements feels impossible by modern standards. But perhaps we're asking the wrong question. Maybe they weren't measuring the Earth to inform their architecture. Maybe they built in accordance with natural proportions already observable in the world around them. They saw patterns in everything, in the arcs of stars, the curve of the Nile, the spiral of shells, and they mirrored those patterns in stone. The pyramid was not their discovery. It was their recognition of a pattern that already existed. When you start to trace those patterns, they seem endless. The angle of the pyramid's slope, approximately 51.84 degrees, corresponds almost perfectly with the tangent of 4p. Its diagonal length reflects the Earth's curvature if scaled up proportionally. Even the spacing between the three pyramids on the plateau appears to mimic planetary distances and star positions. The more measurements we take, the more meaning emerges, as if the structure was designed to reveal different messages depending on how it's observed. Like a multifaceted code, it speaks through geometry to anyone patient enough to listen. Measurement to the ancient Egyptians was a sacred act. The god Thoth, patron of wisdom and science, was said to have invented mathematics, astronomy and the calendar. He was also the scribe of the gods, recording every event in the cosmos. Measuring, therefore, wasn't just practical. It was divine participation, an act of alignment with the order of Ma'at. The word they used for measure, shared roots with words meaning truth and balance. To measure correctly was to bring harmony into being. The builder who laid out the pyramid's base was performing more than engineering. He was performing worship. Each cubit of stone was both a unit and a prayer. The cubit itself, the basic measure of length in ancient Egypt, carries its own mystery. Derived from the length of the forearm from elbow to fingertip, it anchored mathematics in the human body. The standard royal cubit measured about 52.36 centimetres, and its divisions were remarkably consistent across centuries. What's striking is that when scaled up, this measure aligns with planetary and solar proportions, suggesting that even their base unit was chosen to reflect cosmic harmony. To use the human body as the foundation of all measurement is to assert that humanity itself is a reflection of the universe. The builders understood this intuitively. They saw no separation between the biological and the cosmic. The body, the earth, the stars all followed the same ratios. Their measurements were not inventions, they were acknowledgements. When we measure today, we seek precision for its own sake. To the Egyptians, precision was reverence. They measured to understand their place within order. The process itself carried meaning. Surveyors known as rope stretchers would stretch cords across the ground, using knots and tension to define perfect right angles. This act, repeated thousands of times across the construction site, was a ritual of balance. The cords represented the unity between heaven and earth, the tension between chaos and structure. In their work, the physical act of measurement became symbolic of maintaining cosmic equilibrium. The blueprint was a living prayer of proportion. The messages hidden in these measurements become more apparent when we view them not as secrets, but as expressions of understanding. Consider the layout of the Giza complex. The distances between the pyramids correspond to the dimensions of the planetary orbits when scaled relative to the Earth's circumference. The ratios between their heights resemble musical intervals, simple whole number relationships that produce harmony when translated into sound. The same mathematical relationships appear in natural systems, the spacing of planets, the branching of trees, the growth of seashells. The builders might not have known why these patterns repeated, but they recognized their significance. To them, building according to such ratios was not coincidence. It was communication through number, a universal medium. Numbers themselves held deep symbolic meaning. One represented unity, the origin of all things. 2 represented duality, the interplay of opposites. 3 symbolized balance, the reconciliation of opposites through creation. 4 stood for stability, the foundation, the material world. When you multiply these principles through geometry, you get the pyramid, a square base, 4, rising to a single point, 1, supported by 3 triangular faces visible from any side. It's a mathematical metaphor for the unity of creation, expressed in proportion. Every measurement reinforces that theme, balance leading to synthesis, structure leading to meaning. Some scholars have noticed that the pyramid's dimensions, when expressed in royal cubits, form whole numbers with elegant relationships. The base measures 440 cubits per side, the height 280 cubits. These numbers correspond to a 14:11 ratio, again connecting to the constant p, but also to relationships found in musical scales. It's as if the builders tuned their architecture like an instrument, ensuring that every length resonated with harmonic simplicity. In a culture where sound and number were seen as aspects of the same principle, that harmony would have been intentional. The pyramid, by its measurements, hums in mathematical consonance with nature. That harmony might extend even further. When measured precisely, the pyramid's volume and surface area maintain proportional relationships equivalent to the ratios between Earth's mass, radius, and orbital distance from the Sun. Whether by design or by cosmic coincidence, those connections feel deliberate. They suggest that the builders saw the Earth as part of a larger pattern, an object among many, each moving in predictable geometry. The pyramid's measurements become not only terrestrial markers, but cosmic ones. They locate humanity within the architecture of the universe. There's something quietly astonishing about this. Long before telescopes or satellites, without advanced tools, these builders worked out relationships that still define our scientific understanding of the cosmos. How could they have known? Perhaps they didn't know in the empirical sense. Perhaps they sensed it. Cultures that observe the heavens nightly for generations develop a kind of intuition, an embodied mathematics. You don't need equations to feel the rhythm of the planets, to notice the ratios of cycles and seasons. Through observation and reverence, they absorb those rhythms into their architecture. The result is not a code to be cracked, but a song to be heard through measurement. Measurement also encodes intention through repetition. Across Egypt, the same proportions appear in temples, statues, and sacred objects. The temple of Luxor, the Sphinx, even the design of canopic jars reflect the same ratios found in the pyramids. It's as if the entire civilization was tuned to a single scale, all structures resonating with one underlying principle, that harmony is the expression of truth. The builders didn't need to write their philosophy in words. They wrote it in centimeters, angles, and alignments. That's why, even now, we can sense coherence in their work. The messages are not hidden from us. They're written in plain geometry, waiting for modern minds to recognize that beauty and accuracy were never separate. Modern instruments reveal more layers. Laser scanning and satellite mapping show that the Great Pyramid's corners deviate from true north by only 5 arc minutes, a margin so small it would challenge many modern surveyors. The precision suggests not only technical skill, but philosophical commitment. Each correction made during construction would have required enormous effort. They could have built faster, less accurately, and still achieved grandeur. But they chose perfection, because perfection was meaning. The pyramid's measurements were declarations of order, each number a statement that the world could be understood and shaped according to eternal law. Some theorists extend this idea further, proposing that the pyramid encodes constants of physics, p, f, even the speed of light expressed through its latitude. Whether or not such claims hold, they reflect the same instinct, the belief that the monument's measurements are more than architecture. It's tempting to imagine that the builders anticipated future minds discovering these relationships, that they embedded data deliberately as a message across time. But perhaps the truth is simpler and more profound. They didn't need to foresee us. They simply built in harmony with the cosmos, and harmony inevitably reveals itself through number. The message isn't directed, it's universal. When we measure the pyramid, we're not just taking data, we're participating in the same act that created it. Each line we draw, each ratio we calculate, continues the builder's dialogue with order. It's as if the pyramid is teaching us how to remember, to see patterns not as coincidence but as continuity. Every measurement becomes a rediscovery of a truth they already knew, that the universe is intelligible and that intelligence is built into its structure. The Egyptians saw measurement as a moral act as much as a mathematical one. To measure correctly was to act in accordance with Ma'at. To measure poorly was to invite disorder. The surveyors were therefore not just craftsmen, but guardians of truth. Their cords and cubits weren't tools, they were symbols of the balance that keeps existence whole. When they stretched their ropes across the sand, aligning them with the stars, they were weaving human intention into the cosmic grid. The resulting structure was both proof and prayer. Proof that understanding was possible, and prayer that it would endure. This reverence for measurement connects directly to the idea of communication with creators. If one believes that the universe was made according to measure, then to reproduce that measure is to speak back to its maker. The pyramid's ratios, angles, and alignments become a message not in language but in imitation. It says, "We have understood your design, and we have mirrored it. We too can create in balance." It's the most humble and most ambitious statement imaginable. an acknowledgement of dependence and a declaration of kinship all at once. And maybe that's what these measurements have always been trying to tell us. Not that the builders had access to impossible knowledge, but that they recognized order where we often see only randomness. They didn't have to invent the constants they used. They only had to observe the world carefully enough to see them everywhere. The pyramid is the record of that observation, turned into form. Its dimensions are its sentences, its ratios, its grammar, its perfection, its tone. Read correctly, it says something simple and profound. That creation can be known through measure, and that knowledge itself is a sacred act. Even now, as we continue to measure and analyse, we become part of that message. Each new survey, each calculation, each theory adds another layer to the ongoing dialogue between human thought and cosmic structure. The pyramid's dimensions don't change, but our understanding of them does, expanding with each generation. The builder's communication wasn't a closed statement, it was an open one, designed to unfold forever. Their monument teaches not by speaking, but by inviting measurement, by asking us to notice the order in all things and to participate in maintaining it. As the sun rises over the desert and its first light touches the pyramid's face, the shadow it casts stretches across the sand at a precise angle, just as it did thousands of years ago. That shadow is another kind of measurement, a moving reminder that geometry and time are intertwined. The light traces the same ratios, the same lines, repeating the builder's message in the language of dawn. We watch, we measure, we wonder, and in doing so, we continue the conversation. The pyramid's measurements are not secrets to be solved. They are invitations to perceive the universe the way the builders did, through proportion, harmony, and balance. Every number carved into its design is a reminder that the act of measuring, when done with reverence, is itself communication. It tells us that understanding is participation, that knowledge is connection, and that to measure the world is to speak its language. The pyramid speaks through those measurements still, quietly, endlessly, repeating across millennia the same patient message, that meaning and mathematics were never separate, that structure is spirit written in form, and that the universe, when measured rightly, always answers back. The earth is never still. Even when it seems silent, it moves in rhythms too deep for the ear to notice. Beneath every surface, beneath the sand and the stone and the rivers, the planet hums. It expands and contracts almost imperceptibly, like a great living organism breathing in slow motion. Seismic waves ripple through it. Electromagnetic fields shift across its surface. The oceans rise and fall in resonance with the moon. This constant motion is the planet's heartbeat, steady, ancient, and encompassing. And standing at the edge of the Sahara, the pyramids of Giza have been listening to that heartbeat for nearly 5,000 years. When you look at their position on the plateau, it's easy to see their geometry as a statement about the heavens, about alignment with the stars. But there's another alignment, quieter, more intimate. The pyramids are not only oriented to the sky above, they're grounded into the earth below. Their design reflects not just celestial order, but terrestrial rhythm. The builders may not have used modern words like magnetism, resonance, or frequency, but they observed the same phenomena. They felt the desert stillness vibrate after distant thunder, saw how the Nile's floods returned in predictable cycles, noticed how certain stones warmed faster than others in sunlight. The land itself communicated through rhythm, and their architecture mirrored that dialogue. Recent research has revealed something intriguing about the Giza Plateau. It sits on layers of limestone interspersed with granite and subterranean water channels. These materials conduct vibration and electricity differently, creating natural variations in the local electromagnetic field. The combination of these layers means that the ground itself can amplify low-frequency vibrations. In modern terms, the plateau resonates. It hums faintly, like a drum waiting to be struck. The pyramids, built directly on this foundation, might have been placed deliberately to interact with those natural oscillations. Whether the builders understood the mechanism or simply sensed the energy, The result is the same. The monuments sit atop a geological symphony. It's tempting to imagine them as passive structures, inert relics. But viewed differently, they are more like instruments, stone amplifiers tuned to the planet's frequency. Their massive weight presses evenly across the bedrock, anchoring them in the Earth's slow vibration. The shape of the pyramid, with its broad base and converging apex, naturally focuses energy. In modern physics, that geometry concentrates stress lines and can even affect electromagnetic fields. Experiments have shown that pyramid-shaped cavities can influence air ionization and temperature distribution, subtle but measurable effects. Whether by intuition or intent, the builders created forms that engage with their environment on multiple levels: structural, acoustic, energetic. You can imagine standing at the base, barefoot on the stone. The ground feels solid, yet if you listen carefully, not with your ears, but with the quiet attention that comes when everything else fades, you might feel the faint pulse of the earth beneath your feet. It's not mystical, it's physical. The planet trembles constantly from microseismic activity, tides, and even the resonance of ocean waves against continental shelves. These vibrations travel through rock like sound through air. The pyramid, with its precise geometry and dense material, captures and channels some of that motion. The result is an ongoing exchange between structure and planet, a dialogue of vibration continuing unnoticed beneath the desert wind. The Egyptians saw the earth not as inert matter, but as a living body. They called her Geb, father of the gods and bearer of life. The sky, Nut, was his counterpart, arching above him in eternal embrace. Between them lay the space of existence, the place of humans, the cycle of creation. To build a pyramid on that living body was to participate in its rhythm, to give form to its pulse. The pharaoh's resting place was not meant to escape the world, but to merge with it, to become part of the Earth's own heartbeat. The pyramid was a bridge, joining the breathing of the planet to the order of the stars. If you look closely at their placement, the pyramids align not only with Orion and Sirius, but also with subtle geophysical markers. The Giza Plateau lies near the 30th parallel north, a latitude that divides the Earth almost evenly between pole and pole. It's also a region of relative tectonic stability, yet one that still transmits low-frequency seismic vibrations from deeper faults in Africa. That positioning may not have been coincidence. The builders chose a site where the land's natural resonance was both stable and strong. To them, this might have felt like sacred ground, a place where heaven's order met the earth's rhythm in perfect balance. Across cultures, there's a recurring pattern. Sacred structures often sit on sites of unusual energy, places where geology, magnetism, and water converge. In China, feng shui masters identified dragon lines, pathways of vital energy flowing through the land. In the British Isles, ancient monuments align along ley lines, believed to follow similar currents. The Egyptians had their own understanding of sacred geography. They called it Zep Tepi, the first time, the original moment of creation when order emerged from chaos. To build in harmony with Zep Tepi was to recreate that balance, to restore the world's pulse. The Giza Plateau, with its unique geology and alignment, may have been their expression of that principle. Modern instruments can detect fluctuations in the Earth's electromagnetic field around the pyramids, though scientists debate their cause. Some attribute them to the conductive properties of the stone and the groundwater beneath it. Others point to atmospheric interactions between the desert heat and the ionosphere above. Whatever the mechanism, it creates a measurable pattern, a gentle modulation, a subtle hum that seems to shift with temperature and solar activity. To the ancient builders, those phenomena would have been observable through experience, the way air shimmered differently at certain times of day, the way sound carried further at night, the way stillness felt alive after sunset. They didn't need magnetometers to notice the pulse. They lived within it. The pyramid structure seems almost designed to resonate with these natural frequencies. Its 4 triangular sides focus energy toward the apex, while its base anchors it firmly to the ground. The materials, limestone, granite, basalt, each have distinct properties. Granite, used in the internal chambers, contains quartz, a mineral known for its ability to generate electric potential when compressed or vibrated. This piezoelectric effect is what powers modern quartz watches, converting mechanical stress into electrical signals. The same principle applies, in theory, to the pyramid's granite. Seismic vibrations from the earth or acoustic vibrations from ritual sound could have induced small electric currents within the stone. The pyramid, then, might have been more than a symbol. It might have been a literal transducer, converting Earth's motion into subtle electrical resonance. If you think of it that way, the monument becomes part of a planetary circuit. The Earth's magnetic field, constantly shifting, flows through it. The sun's charged particles interact with its mass. The vibrations of wind, thunder, and human voice all feed into its geometry. The builders, by shaping those stones into harmony with natural laws, created a kind of stabilizer, a node in the Earth's broader network of energy. They couldn't have articulated this in modern scientific terms, but they might have understood it experientially. To them, the pyramid was alive because the planet was alive, and to align with that life was to communicate with the source of creation itself. Even today, people standing within certain chambers report sensations of pressure, changes, or faint vibrations underfoot. Some feel warmth or tingling, others an odder clarity or calm. While psychology explains much of this as suggestion, physics provides another layer. Enclosed spaces with parallel stone surfaces can create low-frequency standing waves, inaudible but perceptible as bodily vibration. Infrasound, as it's called, can influence mood and perception, creating sensations of awe or reverence. The pyramid, by its proportions, naturally generates and amplifies such waves. The builders may not have understood the mechanics, but they understood the effect. To stand within that hum was to feel part of something vast. The connection between architecture and the Earth's frequency isn't limited to Egypt. The Schumann resonance, the planet's natural electromagnetic frequency, oscillates around 7.83 Hz. Some ancient temples, stone circles, and pyramids across different continents share dimensions or materials that seem to interact with that frequency range. It's as if ancient cultures, independently, tuned their monuments to the same planetary rhythm. Perhaps this was coincidence, or perhaps it was the result of direct sensory observation. When you live close to the land, without machines or noise, you begin to feel its pulse. The ancient builders may have responded intuitively to that rhythm, embedding it in their designs. The pyramid then becomes a kind of metronome for the planet, a reminder in stone of the frequency that sustains life. From a modern perspective, it's difficult to separate fact from metaphor in these ideas. The scientific and the symbolic blur. But maybe they were never separate for the Egyptians. Their worldview fused observation with reverence, measurement with myth. They didn't study the earth as an object. They communed with it as a being. When they spoke of the land's ka, its life force, they meant that the planet itself participated in creation. To build a pyramid was to interact with that force, to stabilize it, to honor it. The structure wasn't imposed upon the land. It rose out of it, shaped by its contours, aligned with its energy. There's something profoundly ecological in that mindset. We often build by replacing nature, cutting, leveling, reshaping. The Egyptians built by cooperating with it. They studied how the desert held heat, how the ground settled, how light travelled across the plateau. Their measurements were not just technical but environmental. Each decision reflected an awareness of the planet's rhythms. The pyramid is therefore not only a monument to kings but a monument to relationship, a physical expression of coexistence between humanity and Earth. At sunrise, when light first strikes the eastern face, the stone glows faintly red, the same colour as the desert dust. The temperature difference between stone and air creates a small current, a gentle movement of energy up the pyramid's surface. It's invisible but real, measurable as a variation in an electrical potential. The builders wouldn't have described it that way, but they would have felt it. The warmth, the shimmer, the subtle awakening of the monument each morning. The pyramid greeted the day not as a static object, but as a participant in the daily cycle of planetary life. When you step back and think of all these layers together, the geological foundation, the material's conductivity, the alignment to latitude, the acoustic resonance, the thermal interaction, you begin to see the pyramids less as isolated feats of engineering and more as extensions of the Earth itself. They rise from it like natural formations refined by human hands. Their purpose, whatever its details, seems to have been harmony. Whether the builders sought to connect with God, stars, or unseen energies, they did so through synchronization, with the sky above and the planet below. The pulse of the Earth flows through those stones still, steady and patient, an unending rhythm beneath the noise of human time. Every civilization leaves traces of how it understood its world. The Egyptians left geometry and alignment, precision and endurance. But beneath those visible features lies something quieter, awareness. They knew the Earth was alive, that its movements and cycles carried meaning. They built not just to last, but to listen, to hold stillness long enough for the pulse to be felt. That's why, even now, standing before those ancient forms, you can sense a kind of listening emanating from them. It's as if the pyramids themselves are attuned to something we've forgotten to hear. The desert wind passes around them, the ground beneath vibrates with the turning of the planet, the magnetic field fluctuates with the solar wind, and through it all, the pyramids remain steady, absorbing, reflecting, participating. They are the still points in a moving world, anchors for the planet's rhythm. Whether or not they were built to communicate with creators, they communicate something essential about creation itself. That to endure is to resonate with the source. The pulse of the planet beats through their foundations and through ours as well, reminding us that we are made of the same matter, vibrating at the same frequency, listening to the same silence. Beneath every block of the Great Pyramid lies a human story. Not just of kings or gods, but of hands. The people who cut, hauled and placed those stones were more than workers. They were participants in an act that stretched beyond any individual lifetime. The image of thousands labouring in the desert sun is familiar, but what often gets lost in that image is consciousness. The awareness that each movement, each alignment, was part of something immense. Every person involved in the pyramid's creation was both builder and messenger. The stones carried their effort, but also their understanding. Through their work, they spoke for humanity itself. When you stand near the base of the pyramid, the scale of it overwhelms thought. The blocks rise in endless steps, each one weighing as much as a car, some as much as a truck. Yet they fit together with a precision that defies the tools of their time. There are no gaps wide enough to slip a knife blade between. It's easy to imagine how such perfection must have felt to those who achieved it, not pride in isolation, but communion. To shape matter so flawlessly was to align oneself with the order of the universe. Every joint, every angle, every sound of stone striking stone was part of a conversation, one in which the builders spoke not only to their gods, but to the future. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of worker villages beside the pyramids, places where the builders lived, ate and rested. The remains tell a story different from the old myths of slavery. These people were not forced at whip's end. They were organised, nourished and skilled. They worked in rotating crews, some consisting of thousands, others only dozens, each specialising in particular tasks: quarrying, transport, shaping, placement. The scale of coordination suggests not chaos but devotion. They weren't just constructing a monument. They were fulfilling a vision that belonged to everyone. To contribute to it was to belong to something eternal. You can picture them at dawn, the desert still cool, the air filled with the sounds of preparation, stone sledges dragging across wet sand, ropes tightening, voices calling instructions. The horizon glows as the sun rises behind the limestone cliffs. Each morning repeats the same rhythm, each movement part of a living ritual. Work becomes meditation. The human and the monumental merge. Even those at the lowest ranks must have felt the significance of what they were doing. To place a single block correctly was to participate in divine order. That understanding turns labour into language, repetition into remembrance. In a world without modern machinery, the builders relied on ingenuity and cooperation. The sheer logistics of the project demanded shared intelligence. Ramps were built and dismantled, levers fashioned from wood, sledges greased with water to reduce friction. Teams of men pulled in rhythm, their steps coordinated to drum beats. Every action required timing. It was physical communication, bodies synchronized to geometry. If the pyramids were messages, the builders were the syntax, the living structure through which the message took shape. Their collective motion was the first translation of intention into reality. What's remarkable is how much of their humanity remains visible in the details. In the quarries of Aswan, you can still see tool marks left unfinished when work shifted elsewhere. Some stones bear painted inscriptions, crew names, symbols, small jokes. One group called themselves the Drunkards of Mankaura, another the Friends of Khufu. These marks aren't official hieroglyphs, they're graffiti from 4.5 millennia ago. They tell us that the builders laughed, competed, perhaps sang while they worked. They left traces of personality embedded in the project. The monument may have been for eternity, but its creation was profoundly human. There's something profoundly moving about that. These people knew they would never see the work completed. A pyramid took decades to finish. Generations lived and died during its construction. To dedicate one's life to a single task that would outlast you requires a particular kind of faith. Faith not necessarily in gods alone, but in continuity. Each worker had to believe that their effort mattered, that it would contribute to something larger than themselves. That belief itself is a kind of communication, one that transcends time. They weren't only building for a pharaoh, they were building for those who would come after, including us. When you think about communication with creators, whether divine or cosmic, it's easy to imagine messages sent upward toward the stars. But what if the builders themselves were the message? What if their unity, their cooperation, their perseverance were the very qualities being communicated? The pyramids could then be seen as expressions of human potential, proof that intelligence and harmony can coexist at scale. To build such a structure without machines, without modern tools, required not only knowledge but collective will. That will, embodied in stone, is the clearest message the builders ever sent, that humanity, working together, can mirror creation itself. Ancient Egyptian thought reinforced this sense of collective purpose. The concept of ka, the vital essence or spirit, was not limited to individuals. Communities, cities, even nations could have a shared kai. The builders, by joining their efforts in harmony, were strengthening that collective life force. Their work wasn't just labour, it was participation in the ka of Egypt itself, which in turn connected to the divine. In their worldview, the builders were not separate from the gods, they were extensions of divine intention. The act of construction was worship through precision. In that light, every stone becomes a prayer, each placement an offering. The pyramid is not only a message about humanity, it is a message from humanity. The builder's hands carved words into matter, not with writing but with alignment. They didn't need language to express reverence, they expressed it through perfection. Their discipline was their devotion. The message they left isn't one of conquest or dominance, it's one of participation. They didn't claim to control the cosmos, they sought to echo it faithfully. Modern humans often think of monuments as statements of power, structures built to impress or intimidate. But in ancient Egypt, power was inseparable from responsibility. The pharaoh wasn't just ruler, he was the mediator between gods and people, the keeper of balance. The builders served that balance. Their creation maintained Ma'at, the principle of order that held the universe together. In that sense, they weren't constructing a tomb so much as calibrating the world. The pyramid was both symbol and mechanism, a way to align humanity with cosmic stability. The builders were the agents of that alignment. Their message wasn't only upward, it was outward and inward, sustaining harmony in all directions. It's impossible to know exactly how they saw themselves in that grand framework, but fragments of evidence offer glimpses. In workers' tombs found near Giza, carvings depict not servitude but pride. They show craftsmen with their tools, families at rest, offerings of bread and beer for the afterlife. These people were honoured, remembered. Their labour was sacred enough to be recorded alongside the pharaoh's achievements. That inclusion tells us something profound. The Egyptians understood creation as collective. The divine didn't act alone, and neither did humanity. To build was to cooperate with the gods, not to serve them blindly. That cooperation extended beyond the physical. The very act of organisation, the logistics, the planning, the mathematics, was itself a form of intelligence mirroring the intelligence of the universe. The builders learned to coordinate like cells in a living organism, each performing a small function contributing to the whole. From quarry to transport to placement, every stage required communication, trust, rhythm. Those qualities echo the very principles of creation the Egyptians revered: balance, reciprocity, flow. The pyramid wasn't just built by them, it was built through them, as if the pattern of the cosmos temporarily passed through human hands. There's a theory, rarely spoken but deeply felt by many who study ancient architecture, that structures like the pyramids hold the residue of human consciousness, not in a mystical sense, but in the physical imprint of focused attention. When thousands of people work in harmony toward a single purpose, something intangible accumulates, a coherence that lingers in the environment. The pyramid, then, becomes not only a monument of stone but a container for intention. Its presence carries the trace of that unified focus, the way a bell carries the memory of the sound that shaped it. You can feel it even now, standing near it, the sense that human thought, disciplined and reverent, once filled this space and never entirely left. That lingering presence may be why the pyramid still evokes such emotion. You don't need to believe in mysteries to feel awe there. It's built into the geometry, yes, but also into the humanity embedded within it. The pyramid is not merely the work of anonymous labour, it's the crystallization of collective consciousness. Every block was placed by someone who believed the act mattered. Every angle was verified by someone who trusted the system. That faith became physical. It turned into alignment, proportion, and endurance. The builder's message, carried across time, isn't just that they were capable, it's that meaning itself can be built. Imagine one of those builders at the end of a long day, sitting at the edge of the plateau. The sun dips behind the desert, the sky turning the colour of cooled bronze. His muscles ache, his hands are cut, but he looks back at what they've raised and sees a shape emerging, sharp, symmetrical, reaching upward. He might not understand the full scope of its purpose, but he feels its weight, its rightness. The rhythm of his labour has become the rhythm of the structure. In his exhaustion, he's part of something larger, something that will outlive him. He doesn't need words for pride. The pyramid itself will speak for him. That moment, multiplied by thousands of lives, becomes a chorus. It's the sound of humanity discovering its capacity for continuity. In a world where life was short and uncertain, the builders found a way to place permanence within impermanence. Their message to the creators, whatever form those creators took, was clear. We too can endure. We too can build as you built. We too can make order out of dust. The pyramid stands as the translation of that message. human effort written in the same language as the cosmos. Even now, millennia later, their voices haven't faded completely. Archaeologists uncover their footprints, their tools, their inscriptions, their food remains. Each fragment is a word in their ongoing sentence, and when modern visitors walk those same paths, the continuity persists. The pyramid still gathers footsteps, still absorbs breath, still witnesses the human impulse to reach and understand. We have become the next layer of builders, adding to the message through our curiosity. By studying it, we continue it. The conversation has never stopped. That's the essence of the human connection to the pyramids. They weren't built only for kings or gods or ancestors. They were built for awareness itself, the recognition that creation is not a one-way act. To build in harmony is to reply to existence, to say, "We have heard you." The builders were the translators of that reply, turning human will into geometry and permanence. In doing so, they bridged every distance, between body and spirit, between present and eternity, between the earth and whatever intelligence gave it life. The stones remain, but the builder's hands are long gone. Yet the message persists, encoded in alignment, proportion, and endurance. It says something simple and endless, that humanity is not separate from the world it studies, that to create is to communicate, that effort itself can become language. The pyramids are not silent. They're speaking through every grain of sand that touches their base, through every vibration that passes through their foundation, through every gaze that meets their form. They're still repeating what the builders once said without words, that to work in harmony with the universe is to be heard by it. Night always returns to the desert with the same patience. The air cools, the sand stills, and the pyramids stand as they have for thousands of years, silent beneath the stars that once guided their design. The constellations drift slowly overhead, the same patterns that the builders watched, the same lights they aligned their stones toward. It's a strange thought, that the light reaching the pyramids tonight left those stars before many of the world's languages even existed. The photons that strike the limestone now began their journey before history itself. The monuments and the heavens are caught in a dialogue that spans not years, but epochs. And yet, after all this time, one question lingers in the quiet. If the pyramids were messages, has anyone ever answered? The idea of communication implies exchange. One voice speaks, another responds. But what happens when the distance between sender and receiver is measured not in space, but in time? The builders shaped their message in matter so durable that it would outlast everything they knew. They may have imagined gods hearing it, or the stars themselves responding, or perhaps something even more abstract. Some intelligence woven into the structure of existence. Whatever their hope, the centuries since have been filled with silence. No voice has echoed back across the void, yet the pyramids remain, patient as ever, as though waiting was always part of the plan. It's possible that the builders never expected a reply in the way we understand it. Their communication might not have been a question awaiting an answer, but an offering, something sent outward without demand. In that sense, the pyramids have already succeeded. They continue to transmit through their form, through their endurance, through the unbroken line of human eyes that still look upon them. Each generation that stands before them becomes part of the return signal. We look, we measure, we wonder, and in doing so we fulfill the other half of their message. The pyramids ask to be understood, and we continue to answer by trying. But the human mind craves reciprocity. We want to know if anyone, anywhere, heard us. Whether our attempts to reach outward, through art, science, architecture, or prayer, ever touch something greater. In that longing, the pyramids become mirrors. They reflect our own search for acknowledgement. To imagine the builders watching the stars and waiting for a sign is to recognize ourselves in them. We've never stopped looking up for an answer. We've just built new tools for listening, radio telescopes instead of temples, observatories instead of tombs. The question remains the same. Are we alone, or are we part of something listening back? When we point our antennas into space, we're reenacting the same impulse that built the pyramids, the desire to connect across incomprehensible distance. We send signals encoded in mathematics, pulses of radio light carrying prime numbers and chemical formulas, our coordinates among the stars. We imagine other minds capable of decoding them, understanding their meaning as we understood the geometry of Giza. And as those signals travel outward at the speed of light, they become modern pyramids, mathematical monuments extending into the dark. Whether they ever reach a receiver doesn't diminish the gesture. Like the pyramids, the act of sending is itself the message. The builders might have understood that on some level. Communication for them was not a transaction, but a form of participation. To build was to speak, and to endure was to continue speaking. Perhaps that's why they chose stone instead of words. Words fade, languages shift, scripts become unreadable, but proportion, geometry, alignment, those remain comprehensible to any intelligence that understands structure. The pyramids don't need translation. Their syntax is permanence. They continue to express meaning not through change, but through consistency. That's their version of speaking, and waiting for a reply may simply mean existing long enough to be seen again. Time itself becomes the medium of communication. When the builders placed those first stones, they were setting in motion a conversation that would unfold across millennia. Each century adds another layer of interpretation, another voice responding. The Greeks saw the pyramids as symbols of divine perfection. The Arabs saw them as proof of ancient wisdom. The Enlightenment saw them as engineering puzzles. Modern science sees them as data, records of a civilization's knowledge. Every interpretation is a kind of answer, an echo returning from the future to the past. The builders may never have heard it, but the conversation continues nonetheless. The reply, in a sense, is us. Still, the silence of the stars can feel heavy. We listen for signals from other worlds, measure cosmic background radiation for patterns, scan the universe for something that speaks. But maybe the reply has already been given, not through sound or light, but through continuity. The fact that the universe permits intelligence to arise, to build, to question might be the response. The builders asked if they were alone in creation, and creation answered through us, through our capacity to wonder at what they made. The echo took thousands of years to return, but it returned nonetheless, carried by curiosity itself. If you stand inside the king's chamber at night, with no light but the dim glow from a lamp, you feel that waiting embodied. The air feels still, but not empty. It's the stillness of expectation, as if the stone itself is listening for something. The geometry amplifies your heartbeat, magnifies your breath. You become acutely aware of your own presence in a place meant to transcend it. The builders might have stood here once, testing the alignment, hearing the same echoes, feeling the same quiet pressure of anticipation. The pyramid is a vessel designed not only to send, but to listen. Its silence is active, like a held breath waiting for resonance. That quality of listening extends beyond the monument. The desert itself listens. Wind passes through it like sound through an instrument, carrying whispers of distant dunes. The sand shifts minutely with temperature and vibration, tracing patterns invisible to us. Even the earth, turning beneath the pyramids, hums faintly with its own frequency. The planet's low electromagnetic pulse continues endlessly, like a background rhythm to which everything is tuned. Against that constant, the pyramid's silence becomes relative, a deliberate stillness in a world that never truly stops moving. Their quiet is the kind that makes listening possible. In a sense, every human who has looked upon the pyramids has been part of their waiting. Travellers, scholars, wanderers, dreamers, all have projected questions onto those stones. Who built you? Why? What were you trying to say? and each of us has found our own answers in return, shaped by our era, our knowledge, our desires. The builder's message is thus renewed every time it's received. Waiting for a reply doesn't mean waiting for something external. It means waiting for understanding to mature, for consciousness to evolve enough to recognize what's already there. The pyramid doesn't change, we do. The reply comes when we are able to hear it. Perhaps the builders understood that true communication across vast time isn't about immediacy, it's about endurance. To send a message meant for the far future requires faith not only in its receiver, but in the continuity of existence itself. You have to believe the world will go on, that life will persist, that someone will still care enough to look up and listen. The builders built that faith into every layer of stone. The pyramid is as much an act of trust as of engineering. Its size and strength declare confidence in the idea that time will not erase meaning, that even if no voice answers, the conversation remains alive simply because the question still exists. We often think of patience as a human virtue, but here it becomes cosmic. The pyramids have waited longer than any civilization, longer than most species, longer than any recorded language. They have outlasted their own purpose, yet continue to embody it. Waiting for them isn't passive. It's presence stretched across millennia. They don't need an answer to validate their existence. The act of being, unchanging, steadfast, is the message continuing. Their endurance is the reply they give themselves. Sometimes I imagine what it would look like if that reply did come, not from another world, but from the deep structure of reality itself. A moment of perfect resonance, perhaps, when the frequencies of the earth, the stars and the pyramids align so precisely that the whole system hums as one. Maybe it's happened before, countless times, unnoticed by human ears. Maybe the builders felt it in their bones when the geometry clicked into place, when sound, structure and light moved together. That moment would have been communication, pure and wordless, the universe recognizing itself in human effort. The long wait is not a void, it's a process. Meaning unfolds slowly, like light crossing space. When we study the pyramids, when we replicate their alignments or measure their precision, we're not simply observing the past. We're continuing the builder's search. Our instruments extend their eyes. Our data refines their intuition. Their waiting has become ours. The dialogue they began has expanded to include the entire species. We build telescopes instead of temples, computers instead of carvings, but the impulse is unchanged. We're still trying to translate existence into form, still trying to hear the answer beneath the cosmic background noise. There's something comforting in that continuity. It means the builders succeeded, even if they never heard a reply. The proof of success is that we're still listening. Every time we send a probe beyond the solar system, every time we analyze the structure of atoms or the vibration of planets, we're acting on the same instinct that raised the pyramids. The waiting has evolved into inquiry, the silence into science. The builder's question, what lies beyond and how do we speak to it, has become the defining pursuit of our civilization. We are their echo, travelling further than they imagined, still guided by the geometry they trusted. And perhaps, in some distant way, the reply has been continuous all along. The warmth of the sun on the stone, the rhythm of the Nile's floods, the persistence of life itself, all are responses, confirmations that existence continues. The builders asked for connection, and the world answered by remaining connected, by carrying their creation through time. Every grain of sand that still touches the pyramid's base, every photon that reflects from its surface is a form of acknowledgement. The universe may not speak in words, but it replies through persistence. It's easy to mistake silence for absence, but in the desert, silence is fullness. It contains everything that sound would disturb. The pyramids know this. They've been surrounded by that fullness for longer than our histories stretch. Their waiting isn't empty, it's listening. And in that listening they remind us of something essential, that communication is not always immediate. that meaning can take millennia to unfold, that sometimes the act of speaking is enough. The reply may come in ways we can't yet perceive, or it may already be here, woven into the continuity of being. The pyramids, in their stillness, are both the question and the answer, both the voice and the echo. And as long as they stand beneath the slow turning of the stars, the conversation continues, unbroken, patient, alive in every vibration of stone against sky. At night, when the wind finally dies and the desert turns almost completely still, the pyramids seem to breathe. The air cools, the sound of sand shifting fades into nothing, and the sky stretches outward in absolute silence. From a distance, they appear less like structures and more like shadows against the horizon, ancient silhouettes pressed between earth and eternity. The stars above are the same stars that guided the builders, the same lights that have burned, unblinking since long before the first block was placed. Their light takes thousands of years to reach the ground, and when it does, it touches the same surfaces it has touched for millennia. In that moment, the exchange begins again. The stones receive. The sky responds. The echo continues. That echo is not made of sound. It's older than that. It's the rhythm that moves through everything that exists, the pulse that carries energy from one form to another, never ending, only changing. The pyramids participate in that rhythm by existing so completely, so consistently, that they become instruments through which the echo moves. They don't speak, and yet they communicate. They don't move, and yet they transmit. They have become, through their stillness, part of the language of the world. If you imagine the moment they were finished, the last capstone placed, the last worker stepping back, you can almost hear that first instant of silence. The sound of tools would have faded, the voices stilled, the air filled with that peculiar quiet that comes only after completion. For the first time, the monument stood alone, without human motion surrounding it, and in that silence, the echo began. Every vibration from the earth's core, every gust of wind, every thunderclap, every footstep since, has passed through those stones, each leaving a trace, however small. The pyramid is not just a record of human will, it's a receiver for everything that has ever touched it. That's why it still feels alive. The echo within it is not memory alone, it's continuity. When you walk near it, even the sound of your breath is added to that long, ongoing conversation. The structure absorbs vibration, reflects it, releases it slowly into the air. In a physical sense, it's just resonance and density, but in a human sense, it feels like participation. To stand beside it is to feel yourself become part of something that doesn't end. The stones don't distinguish between the footsteps of a builder or a traveller or a dreamer. They record them all equally. The echo belongs to everyone. Perhaps that's what the builders intended all along. They may not have known the shape their civilization would take, or what the future would bring, but they must have understood that everything they did would continue to vibrate through time. Their message wasn't meant to fade when the pharaoh's name was forgotten. It was meant to live in the act of endurance itself. The echo that travels through the pyramid is also the echo of intention. Human focus sustained long enough to alter the landscape of the world. It's the same echo that lives in art, in science, in every act of creation that outlasts its maker. The medium changes, the resonance remains. In the language of physics, nothing ever truly disappears. Sound waves decay, but their energy disperses, joining other motions. Light travels until it's absorbed, then re-emitted as heat, then as infrared radiation, until even that becomes part of the background hum of the universe. The pyramids are embedded in that process. They absorb light, hold heat, release it into the night air and begin again. Every day they breathe energy in and out, part of the same thermodynamic rhythm that drives stars and storms and cells. Their echo is not metaphor, its physics manifest as permanence. The longer you think about it, the more it seems that the pyramids aren't separate from the Earth at all. They're extensions of it, ridges of stone rising from the desert crust, aligned so precisely that they participate in the planet's motion. Each face catches light at a different hour, each edge shadows in perfect sequence. Over the year, as the sun tilts and returns, those shadows trace the same lines of time the builders once used to mark their calendars. It's a slow, endless choreography. Light falling, stone reflecting, heat radiating, sand shifting, all in rhythm with the planet's rotation. The echo's not just sound or memory, it's pattern, repetition, order reasserting itself again and again. That's why the pyramids never seem to age. Their surfaces erode, their edges soften, but the form remains. The geometry resists chaos by embracing it. Sandstorms, earthquakes, centuries of wind, all have moved across them, yet the essential proportions endure. The echo adapts not by stopping change, but by absorbing it. The builders must have understood that endurance doesn't mean stillness, it means participation in the constant flux without losing identity. The pyramid survives not because it resists time, but because it resonates with it. It's strange to think that a structure so massive can embody such subtlety, but that's what makes it so human. The builders weren't immortal, but they created something that behaves as if it were. Their echo continues through the material they left behind, but also through the minds of those who remember them. Every generation reinterprets their work, each adding another layer to the vibration. Scholars measure the angles, philosophers ponder the meaning, artists capture the shape in paint or film. Even the act of imagining what the pyramids are for becomes part of their echo. The idea extends as far as the structure itself. When you think about communication with creators, the echo takes on a new kind of significance. Maybe the reply the builders were waiting for was never meant to come from outside. Maybe it comes from within. The recognition that creation itself is self-sustaining. That meaning reverberates eternally once it's set in motion. In that sense, the pyramids are proof of conversation not between beings, but between being and itself. The echo never ends because existence keeps generating it. Every vibration, every thought, every breath is part of the same continuity. That continuity is everywhere, though we rarely notice it. It's in the pulse of the Earth's magnetic field, in the hum of atoms, in the patterns of ocean tides and neural waves. The same frequencies repeat across scales, from the vibration of molecules to the orbits of planets. The builders may not have known these terms, but they observed the principle. They saw rhythm in everything. The flow of the Nile, the precession of the stars, the cycles of life and death. By building in harmony with those rhythms, they ensured that their monument would join the echo, amplifying it rather than opposing it. The result is a structure that doesn't just survive time, it sings with it. Even the smallest details contribute. The internal chambers, with their specific proportions, create resonant frequencies that align with human vocal tones. A chant or hum within those walls doesn't simply reflect, it multiplies, folds back upon itself, becomes more than the sound that produced it. The air and the stone respond together, a collaboration between human and material. In that moment, the builder's intention and the Earth's vibration merge. The echo isn't symbolic, it's literal. The pyramid amplifies whatever is placed within it: sound, heat, thought, presence. Its design ensures that nothing inside it ever truly disappears. Outside, the desert provides its own accompaniment. Wind patterns change but repeat in cycles. The air whirls around the corners of the pyramid, creating vortices that produce low-frequency tones, almost inaudible but measurable. These tones vary with the seasons, meaning the pyramid constantly interacts with its environment in subtle ways. Every gust of air, every grain of sand striking stone, adds another note to the endless composition. If one could listen with instruments sensitive enough, the desert would reveal a perpetual music of interaction, a faint but unbroken sound of time moving through matter. Humans, too, have become part of that sound. Every footstep across the plateau, every voice raised in awe or disbelief contributes to the echo. The frequencies of speech, the vibrations of vehicles, even the heartbeat of a visitor standing still, all are absorbed into the landscape. The pyramid doesn't distinguish between ancient ritual and modern curiosity. It accepts both, folds them into the same resonance. That's why standing near it can feel strangely intimate, as though the monument recognizes you. It doesn't, of course, but the continuity of vibration gives that impression, the sense that you're being included in an ancient exchange, that your presence is another note in the eternal chord. Over centuries, civilizations have risen and fallen around those stones. Empires that once claimed eternity have vanished into dust. Religions have changed, languages have evolved, and yet the pyramids remain exactly where they were, casting their same shadows, tracing the same paths of sunlight. The echo has outlasted every ideology. It doesn't belong to any single people anymore. It belongs to the planet, to the sky, to time itself. The builders may have begun it, but they could not contain it. Once released, the echo spread outward, through history, through thought, through the collective imagination of humanity. That's perhaps the most powerful form of communication there is, one that transcends language, ownership, and even intent. The pyramids continue to generate meaning long after their original purpose has been forgotten. They remind us that creation, once set in motion, keeps speaking in ways the creator cannot predict. That's the nature of echoes. They travel farther than their source, bouncing through dimensions of space and thought until they merge with everything else. The builders may have wanted to speak to their gods, but they ended up speaking to us, to every mind that would ever try to understand what they made. The echo never ends because interpretation never ends. Sometimes, on particularly still nights, when the air over the plateau cools evenly and the stars reflect faintly on the sand, you can almost believe that the echo becomes visible. The horizon shimmers, the air thickens slightly, and the silence deepens into something like presence. It's not supernatural. It's simply the physics of temperature and light. But it feels meaningful. It feels like response. The world gives back what has been given to it, not in words, but in sensation. That's what the builders might have hoped for. Not conversation, but communion. To live in harmony with the echo is to remember that everything participates in it. The pyramids teach that lesson by example. They don't resist the desert, they exist within it. They don't defy erosion, they endure it. Their survival is not triumph over nature but collaboration with it. The echo that passes through them isn't just sound or energy, it's wisdom. It's the understanding that permanence arises not from opposition, but from resonance. When something vibrates in tune with its environment, it lasts. When it fights against that rhythm, it fades. The builders, whether consciously or not, captured that truth in stone. We often imagine that the universe is silent, but silence is just another form of sound too slow or too constant for us to hear. The same applies to time. The pyramids measure it not in minutes or years, but in the rhythm of endurance. Each century is a heartbeat, each erosion a breath. They remind us that the universe itself echoes, that everything born from it carries its vibration. The stars above them pulse with energy, the atoms within them vibrate with motion. The echo never stops, and the pyramids, by existing as perfectly as they do, allow us to feel that endlessness in a form we can touch. And perhaps that's why they continue to draw us toward them, century after century. We don't visit only to look at ancient stones. We go to feel what they transmit. We go to stand inside the echo. In a world that changes too fast, that forgets its own rhythm, the pyramids remind us what continuity feels like. They remind us that silence can contain connection, that waiting can contain conversation, that endurance can contain life. So the echo continues, through the sand, through the air, through the minds of everyone who has ever looked upon those shapes and felt time stretch. It passes into the stars, returns with their light, moves through the planet's core, circles back in the vibration of the Earth's pulse. It has no beginning, no end, only transformation. The builders began it, the world sustains it, and we, simply by being aware of it, carry it forward. The stones hum softly in the starlight, the desert breathes around them, and the echo moves on, unbroken across eternity.